If you're enjoying this video, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell. Share it with your friends and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Every like and subscribe helps the channel grow. The sound of the axe came first, then the screaming. I jerked awake in my cabin, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The dream again. Korea. Always Korea. In the worst of winter. My name is Thomas Mercer. I'm a park ranger in the Adirondack Mountains, and I've seen things in these woods that no one would believe. But what happened that winter of 1957 still haunts me, still makes me wake up sweating even on the coldest nights. I pulled on my heavy boots that morning and looked out the window. Fresh snow had fallen overnight, at least 2 feet of it blanketing, everything in white. Beautiful but deadly if you didn't respect it. The thermometer outside my window read 5 below zero. Cold, but nothing unusual for January in the mountains. As I stepped outside to begin my morning patrol, something felt off. The woods were too quiet. In winter, you'd still hear chickadees or nuthatches, maybe a woodpecker working on a tree. But there was nothing, just the sound of my snowshoes crunching through the drifts. I'd been a ranger for 7 years after coming home from Korea. The war left me with nightmares and a long scar down my left side, but the peaceful mountains had been my healing place. I knew every trail, every ridge, every valley in my section of the park. At least I thought I did. The snow kept falling as I walked my route. I noticed something strange about my breath. The fog it made was thicker than usual, hanging in the air like a ghost. I'd been in plenty of cold before, but this was different somehow. When I got back to my cabin outpost around noon, the radio crackled to life. "Mercer, you there? Over." It was Frank from headquarters. "I'm here. Over. We've got 3 hikers missing. Group of college kids who ignored the storm warnings and headed up to the northern ridge yesterday. They were supposed to check in this morning at the East Creek shelter. Never showed. Over." My stomach tightened. The northern ridge was brutal territory even in good weather. In a snowstorm, those kids were in serious trouble. "I'll head out to look for them. Over. Be careful, Tom. Storm's getting worse. Over and out." I packed my rescue gear quickly. Extra blankets, first aid kit, emergency rations, flares. As I slipped my knife into my belt, my fingers brushed against the raised scar tissue on my side. Korea. The winter there had taught me how cold could kill faster than bullets, how hunger could make people do terrible things. The snow was falling harder as I set out, big flakes that seemed to follow me like they were being pulled in my direction. I headed north, sticking to the trail the hikers would likely have taken. That's when I saw the first weird thing. Animal tracks in the snow, deer from the look of them, that just stopped. Like the animal had vanished into thin air. I'd tracked plenty of animals in my time, and tracks don't just end unless the creature was picked up or... I didn't even know what. A mile further on, I found something worse. A deer carcass, frozen solid, but not like any animal kill I'd ever seen. It was completely hollow, like something had sucked out everything inside. And strangest of all, no blood, not a drop in the snow. The deer looked frozen from the inside out. I checked my thermometer. It read 40 below zero. That couldn't be right. The forecast only called for 10 below at worst. But the mercury didn't lie, and I could feel it now, an unnatural cold that seemed to cut right through my heavy parka and thermal layers. Whatever was happening in these mountains, I knew right then it wasn't natural. And those missing hikers were walking right into it. I pushed on through the worsening storm until I reached an old hunter's shelter, just a 3-sided wooden lean-to where hikers sometimes stopped to rest. The missing students weren't there, but someone had been recently. A small fire pit still held warm embers. While searching the shelter, I found something tucked between 2 logs, a leather-bound journal, its pages yellow with age. Inside, faded handwriting dated 1932 told a story that made my blood run cold. The winter spirit walks like a man, but hungers like nothing of this earth. The Algonquins say it was once human before the hunger changed it. The cold follows it like a shadow. I shoved the journal in my pack just as my radio picked up fragments of voices, not English, but something that sounded like Native American. Language. The static-filled words faded in and out, though there hadn't been any active Algonquin settlements in this region for decades. Ranger Mercer. The voice behind me nearly made me jump out of my skin. I spun around, hand reaching for my knife. An old man stood at the edge of the shelter, leaning on a walking stick. His weathered face was lined with years, but his eyes were sharp and alert under his fur hat. "Robert Jacobson," he said, holding up his empty hands to show he meant no harm. "I followed your tracks from the main trail. You shouldn't be out here, sir," I said, relaxing slightly. "There's a storm coming." "The storm is already here," he replied, his voice grave. "But it's not a natural one. That's why I came to find you, to warn you about what walks with the winter." I invited him to sit by the embers of the fire, which I built back up. As we warmed our hands, he told me he was one of the last Algonquin guides in the region. His people had stories about these mountains and what lived in them during the harshest winters. "Wendigo," he said quietly, as if afraid. "The word itself might summon something. It was once a man who ate human flesh during the Great Blizzard of 1878. Now it hungers always, but can never be satisfied." I'd heard old legends about the Wendigo before. Every ranger in these parts had. But I'd always dismissed them as campfire stories. "I'm looking for 3 missing hikers," I told him. "College kids." Jacobson's face grew even more serious. "Then we must hurry. The Wendigo will be drawn to them." We set out together, the old man moving with surprising speed through the deep snow. About a mile further up the trail, we found a frozen blood trail leading to a single glove half buried in the snow. When I picked it up, I nearly dropped it in horror. There were still fingers inside, perfectly preserved by the unnatural cold. "It's starting," Jacobson whispered. Before we could discuss what to do next, we heard someone calling my name. "David." Hoffman, one of the junior rangers, came trudging through the snow toward us. "Hoffman, what are you doing out here?" I shouted. "I told you to stay at the outpost." "Sorry, sir," he panted, his young face red from exertion. "But headquarters radioed again after you left. They're really worried about those hikers with this freaky cold front moving in." I introduced him to Jacobson, and we decided to make camp for the night in a small cave I knew nearby. The temperature was dropping rapidly, and even with our winter gear, traveling after dark would be suicide. As we settled in the cave with a small fire, we heard something that made us all freeze. A woman's voice, crying for help somewhere in the darkness outside. "One of the hikers?" Hoffman asked, already reaching for his pack. Jacobson grabbed his arm. "No," the old man said firmly. "It's the Wendigo. It mimics human voices to lure prey." "That's ridiculous," Hoffman scoffed, but I could see fear in his eyes. "We stay together." "Until morning," I ordered. "Hoffman, you take first watch. Wake me in 2 hours." I must have fallen into a deeper sleep than I intended, because when I woke up, the fire was almost out, and Hoffman was gone. "He's gone." I shook Jacobson awake. "Hoffman's missing." We quickly packed up and followed Hoffman's tracks from the cave entrance. The snow was falling so heavily now that his footprints were already half filled, but we could still make them out until they suddenly changed. One set of human boots being followed by something else, something with enormous cloven hooves that sank deep into the snow. "It's hunting him," Jacobson said grimly. We pushed ourselves to move faster, following the tracks until we found Hoffman's jacket hanging from a tree branch. It was covered in frost and torn apart, not from the outside in, but from the inside out, as if his body had suddenly expanded and burst through the fabric. The blizzard around us grew fiercer, but in a way I'd never seen before. The storm seemed to follow our movements, with the eye staying directly above us, while whiteout conditions circled all around. It was like we were being watched by the storm itself. My grandfather survived an encounter with the Wendigo, Jacobson told me as we struggled forward. He burned a special mixture of herbs and animal fat. The smell drives it back, weakens it. I brought some with me. Jacobson, Hoffman's voice called from somewhere ahead of us. Ranger Mercer, help me. We rushed forward, but what we found made me sick to my stomach. Hoffman was there, or what was left of him. His body was twisted unnaturally, partially eaten and frozen solid. His eyes were wide open, staring in terror at something we couldn't see. We need to keep moving, Jacobson insisted, pulling me away from the gruesome sight. It knows we're here now. The trees around us began to crack and fall, their trunks splitting from the extreme cold. They created a barrier of fallen logs that seemed to be forcing us toward a steep ravine. It's herding us, I realized aloud. We tried to backtrack, but more trees fell behind us. We had no choice but to move forward, carefully picking our way along the edge of the ravine. The ice beneath our feet creaked and groaned. Suddenly, the sheet of ice under Jacobson gave way. I lunged for his hand, but got only air as he disappeared into the darkness below with a terrified shout. Now I was alone in the heart of the unnatural blizzard. The temperature must have been 60 below zero by now. Every breath felt like fire in my lungs. That's when I saw the footprints, human-shaped but impossibly large, barefoot despite the killing cold. Each step had melted through 6 feet of snow right down to the ground beneath. I saw it first as just a shadow against the white of the blizzard, unnaturally tall and thin. As it came closer, I could make out more details. A head like a deer, skull, skin pulled too tight over jutting bones, and arms so long they nearly touched the ground. My hands shaking with cold and fear, I raised my rifle and fired. The bullet hit, but instead of blood, a freezing mist poured from the wound. The creature moved with impossible speed, its limbs bending at unnatural angles as it flowed between trees like a spider. And then it spoke. A horrible sound of multiple voices layered together. I recognized Hoffman's voice mixed with others, all speaking at once. Thomas Mercer, they said together. We've been waiting for you since Korea. My fingers were turning black with frostbite despite my insulated gloves. I could feel the heat being pulled from my body, as if the creature was somehow feeding on my warmth. I retreated backward, not daring to take my eyes off the approaching Wendigo. My back hit solid ice. I'd reached the wall of a small ice cave. In the side of the ravine, with no other choice, I ducked inside. The walls of the cave reflected distorted images of the Wendigo, making it look like it was approaching from all angles at once. I pushed deeper into the cave, my breath coming in short, painful gasps. Something strange was happening to my body. My skin felt tight, like it was stretching, and my stomach, my stomach cramped with a hunger unlike anything I'd ever felt before. A craving for meat, raw and bloody. The first sign of transformation, I realized with horror. The Wendigo's curse was already working its way into me. Deeper in the cave, I found Jacobson. He was frozen solid, positioned upright against the wall as if placed there deliberately. A strange symbol was carved into his forehead, but his supply, the pack, was untouched beside him. With shaking hands, I opened the pack. Inside was a small leather pouch containing the herb mixture he'd mentioned, and beneath it, a flare gun. Heavy footsteps approached the cave entrance. The Wendigo had found me. It had to duck its emaciated body to enter the cave, its antlered skull scraping the ice ceiling. Its jaw unhinged like a snake's, revealing rows of needle-like teeth, and a throat that seemed to tunnel into endless darkness. As it reached for me with impossibly long fingers, I noticed strange symbols carved into its visible ribcage. Markings that matched the one on Jacobson's forehead, and pictures I'd seen in historical archives of Algonquin writing. It was now or never. I pulled out my knife and coated the blade with the herb mixture from Jacobson's pouch. As the creature lunged, I drove the knife deep into its chest. The Wendigo let out a shriek at a frequency that cracked the ice around us. Its bony hand caught my arm, and I screamed as instant frostbite claimed 3 of my fingers. The cave began to collapse around us. With my remaining strength, I pulled out the flare gun and fired directly into the wound I'd made in the creature's chest, igniting. The herbs still on my blade. Blue flames erupted across the Wendigo's body, strange fire that gave off no heat. The multiple voices trapped inside it screamed in different languages as it thrashed wildly, bringing down more of the cave ceiling. An avalanche started, burying the burning creature. I squeezed through a narrow tunnel in the ice, crawling desperately, as the entire cave system collapsed behind me. For miles, I dragged myself through the snow, fighting both the elements and the unnatural hunger growing inside me. Each minute the craving got stronger. I found myself staring at my frost-blackened fingers, wondering how they would taste. No, I wouldn't give in. I wouldn't become that thing. I don't remember much of the final miles, just snow and pain and hunger. When I finally reached the forest ranger station, I collapsed through the door, more dead than alive. I woke up in a hospital bed 3 days later. The doctors told me I had severe frostbite and hypothermia. They'd amputated my dead fingers and treated me for exposure, but they were puzzled by some of my symptoms. "You should have starved out there," one doctor said, checking my chart, "but your body shows signs of extreme caloric excess, like you'd been feasting for days." During my recovery, the hunger came in waves. When orderlies brought food, I had to be restrained once when I lunged for raw meat on a food cart passing in the hall. They thought it was shock or trauma from my ordeal. The official report listed Hoffman and Jacobson as victims of extreme weather conditions. The 3 missing hikers were never found. The strange cold front was dismissed as a freak weather phenomenon. No one believed my delirious ramblings about the Wendigo. 2 weeks after I was admitted, a package arrived for me. Inside was Jacobson's journal, sent by his daughter who found my name mentioned in his notes. The journal contained records of Wendigo encounters dating back centuries. The final pages revealed a truth more horrible than I could have imagined. The Wendigo cannot be killed, only temporarily banished, and those it touches are marked forever. Returned to ranger duty the following spring, but requested a transfer to the southern parks, far from the Adirondacks. In the warm forests of Georgia, I tried to forget what happened, though nightmares haunted me. Dreams of running through snow on all fours, hunting. For years I thought I'd escaped the curse. I married, had children, built a normal life. But in the winter of 1968, during an unusually harsh cold snap, my skin began to stretch again. The hunger returned, and at night I heard Algonquin whispers on the wind. I knew what I had to do. I found Jacobson's journal and the last of the herbs he had given me, preserved all these years. I told my wife I was going fishing and drove north to the Adirondacks. The rangers there found my abandoned vehicle at the trailhead a week later. In it was a journal entry in my handwriting that said simply, "It's in me now. I won't become what it is." They never found my body, but hikers in those mountains still report seeing a tall, gaunt figure watching them from between the trees. They say you can only see it when snow begins to fall. A man-shaped shadow with sad eyes. I am Thomas Mercer, and I chose to end my life rather than become the monster. But in these mountains, death isn't always the end. Sometimes it's just another form of hunger, and when you hike in the Adirondacks and feel the winter coming on too quick, too fierce around you, don't follow the voices calling for help. Just run, run, and don't look back, because I'm still here and I'm so very hungry. I still hear them sometimes, the screams echoing through limestone tunnels, bouncing off walls that have stood for millions of years. But what haunts me most aren't the screams. It's the clicking sounds that followed them. My name is Michael Foster. I was a park ranger at Mammoth Cave National Park in Kentucky. Was. That's the key word. Now I sit in this white room, telling my story to doctors who smile and nod, but don't believe a word. They should. They really, really should, because something is spreading through America's caves. Something ancient, something hungry. And I'm the only one who knows the truth. It all started 3 weeks ago, during my regular morning inspection. I loved those quiet moments before the tourists arrived. Just me and the gentle drip, drip, drip of water carving the cave, one patient drop at a time. After 12 years working these caves, I knew every passage, every limestone formation. This place was more home to me than my empty apartment. The cool air wrapped around me like an old friend as I limped down the main path. My bad leg, a souvenir from a cave collapse 6 years back, always ached less in the steady cave temperature. I switched on my headlamp, watching shadows dance across the ancient stone ceiling. People don't realize how alive a cave is. Not just with bats and blind fish, but the cave itself always growing, always changing, just too slowly for impatient human eyes to notice. Except that morning, things had changed overnight. I felt it first, a strange vibration through my boots, like a subway train passing far below, except there are no subways under Mammoth Cave, just miles of unexplored darkness. I stopped walking and knelt down, pressing my palm flat against the cool stone floor. There it was again, a gentle tremor. Wrong, all wrong. This region doesn't get earthquakes, just some far-off blasting, I muttered to myself. But I didn't believe it. I continued deeper into the cave system, following the tourist route that twisted through massive chambers with ceilings as high as a 5-story building. The deeper I went, the more things felt off. The air was wrong, dry, like a desert when caves are naturally humid. My lips cracked, and the knuckles of my hands felt tight and itchy. I licked my lips and tasted blood from a split in the lower one. When I reached Bottomless Pit, a narrow ravine that drops nearly 200 feet, I noticed something else strange. The iron gate blocking an old passage to the left was bent, not rusted, through or worn down, bent outward like something incredibly strong had pushed it from the inside, a passage that had been sealed for safety reasons 20 years ago. "Hello?" I called, my voice bouncing back at me from a dozen different angles. "Anyone down here?" I knew there wasn't. I was the first one in the cave that morning. Beyond the bent gate, my flashlight beam caught something unusual on the passage. Floor, footprints in the wet mud, fresh ones, but not from standard issue ranger boots or tourist sneakers. These were different. Too long, toes spread wide, oddly jointed. Not animal, but not quite human either. I pulled out my radio. "Base, this is Foster. I've got signs of unauthorized access in Section F, over." "Just static," answered me. I tried again. "Hello? Anyone copy?" More static then, voices, but not from my team. These voices spoke words I couldn't understand, a language that sounded ancient and wrong coming through modern equipment. The voices grew louder, more insistent. I shut the radio off. That's when I noticed the bats, hundreds of them, flying frantically through the main chamber in daylight hours when they should have been sleeping. Their wings created a storm of panicked motion against the cave ceiling. Something had disturbed them. Something had them terrified. I stood there, flashlight aimed at the bent gate and strange footprints, feeling a cold that had nothing to do with the cave temperature seep into my bones. "Dad," I whispered, clutching the worn copy of Journey to the Center of the Earth I always carried in my pocket, my father's book, before he disappeared in these same caves in 1961. "What's happening?" Here, the dripping water that had been my peaceful morning soundtrack now sounded like a countdown, and deeper in the darkness, something answered with a soft, deliberate click. I backed away from the bent gate, my flashlight beam shaking slightly. That clicking sound didn't come again, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. "Just get back to the entrance," I told myself. "Report what you found." As I turned, my light caught something on the cave wall that made me freeze. The ancient Native American drawings, the ones I'd studied 100 times, the ones that had been carefully documented by archaeologists, had changed. I stepped closer, heart pounding in my chest. Where there had once been simple hunting scenes, now stood twisted figures with long limbs and strange, antenna-like growths from their heads. And they weren't hunting animals anymore. They were hunting people. "This isn't possible," I whispered. "Drawings carved in stone don't move overnight. They don't change themselves. Someone must have done this. Someone who broke in, bent the gate and changed the artwork. A very sick prank." But deep down, I knew better. I hurried back toward the entrance, my bad leg aching as I pushed my pace. The vibrations in the floor seemed stronger now, tiny pebbles dancing across flat surfaces as I passed. My flashlight flickered once, twice, then stabilized. When I finally reached the main entrance chamber, I found Luz Rodriguez waiting for me. Relief washed over me at the sight of another person. Luz was a graduate student, short with dark curly hair, always pulled back in a tight ponytail. She carried a heavy backpack of scientific equipment for her research on limestone erosion. We'd worked together for the past 3 months, and she was one of the few people who didn't seem bothered by my habit of talking to myself. "Michael, there you are," she said, smiling. "I was about to come looking for you. Everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I hesitated. Luz was smart, scientist smart, and wouldn't believe me without proof. Heck, I barely believed myself. "Found some vandalism," I said finally, "and the gate's been damaged. We should report it before the tours start." "Teenagers?" she asked, adjusting her equipment. "Maybe." I didn't mention the footprints or the clicking sound. Instead, I asked, "Did you notice anything strange when you came in? The air feels dry today." Luz nodded, pulling out a small device from her pocket. "Humidity readings are way down. I was going to check if the monitoring equipment is broken. Cave systems don't just lose moisture overnight." "And there's something else," I added, feeling slightly more confident now. I felt vibrations in the floor deeper in, like mini earthquakes. Instead of dismissing me, Luz frowned. I felt them too, thought I was imagining things. She tapped a finger against her chin, thinking. "Could be related to my research. If the water tables are shifting dramatically, it might explain both the moisture loss and the tremors." I nodded, grateful she didn't think I was crazy. We walked together to the ranger station near the entrance, where I filed a report about the damaged gate. I didn't mention the changed drawings or the strange footprints, some things you have to see for yourself before reporting. "I'm heading back in to collect samples from the lower chambers," Luz said as I finished my paperwork. "Want to come? I could use the extra hands, and you know the cave better than anyone." I hesitated. Every instinct told me to stay out of the cave today. But I couldn't let Luz go alone, not with what I'd seen. Besides, I needed to know what was happening to my cave. "Sure," I said. "Let me grab some better equipment first." I packed my special caving gear, tools I'd designed myself. After years of exploration, extra batteries, a backup light system, first aid supplies, water, energy bars, and my father's old compass that always pointed true north, unlike GPS devices that went haywire in the deeper chambers. As we prepared to head back in, I noticed the first tour group of the day arriving. A dozen tourists with excited faces, cameras ready. "Maybe we should close the cave today," I said quietly to Rick, my supervisor. "Just until we check out that damaged gate." Rick laughed. "For a bent gate? Come on, Foster, that's ticket money walking through the door." But no buts. "The tour routes are nowhere near that old passage. Take Rodriguez, do your inspection, fix the gate if you can." I gave up arguing and joined Luz at the entrance. As we passed the tour group, a strange feeling came over me. I wanted to warn them, to tell them to go enjoy the sunshine above ground instead. But what could I say? That the cave felt wrong today. That ancient drawings had somehow changed themselves. They'd think I was nuts. Something's bothering you, Luce said, as we descended into the darkness again. More than just a bent gate, I sighed. Promise not to laugh? Scout's honor, she replied, making a little salute. The cave feels different today. And I'm not talking about scientific measurements. It feels, I struggled to find the right word, awake. Instead of laughing, Luce was quiet for a long moment. You know, the Native Americans who first discovered these caves believed they were living things, that they breathed, dreamed, even hunted sometimes. A chill ran down my spine. Hunted what? People who didn't show proper respect, she said softly. We continued in silence after that, our lights cutting through darkness that suddenly seemed thicker than before. The vibrations came and went, stronger now, making small rocks shift under our boots. When we reached the chamber with the ancient drawings, I held my breath and aimed my light at the wall. Oh my God, Luce whispered. The drawings had changed again. The strange figures were closer to the center now, hunting, feeding. I don't understand, Luce said, her scientific mind struggling with what she was seeing. This isn't possible. That's what I thought too. I moved my light to the cave floor, revealing a pool of water that hadn't been there earlier. The surface rippled with our approach, and rainbow colors swirled across it like oil, but it wasn't oil. The patterns moved against the ripples, like something swimming just beneath the surface. Luz knelt down to collect a sample in a test tube. As she did, her equipment light flickered and died. Battery's dead, she said, sounding confused. I just charged everything this morning. Electronic equipment acts up down here, I explained, handing her one of my backup lights. Gets worse the deeper you go. A soft ping made us both jump. The sound came from Luz's backpack. She pulled out a small radiation detector, its needle pushing far into the red zone. That's not right, she muttered, tapping the device. We shouldn't have any significant radiation in a limestone cave. My hand went to my father's book in my pocket. Dad had been a geologist, studying these same caves when he disappeared. His notes, scribbled in the margins of Journey to the Center of the Earth, mentioned radiation spikes before he vanished. Just as I was about to tell this to Luce, we heard it, a clear, distinct sound that didn't belong in a cave. Click, click, click. Luce's eyes widened. What was that? Some kind of bat? I shook my head slowly, my mouth suddenly dry. No bat makes that sound. The clicking came again, closer now, and with it, a sweet, sickly smell like rotting flowers mixed with chemicals. We need to go, I said, grabbing Luz's arm. Now! As we turned to leave, my light caught something on the cave ceiling, a long, dark shape moving against the natural flow of shadows. Not a bat, not a shadow, something else, and it was following us. We ran, or at least we tried to. My bad legs slowed us down, and the cave itself seemed to work against us. Passages I'd known for years suddenly ended in walls that shouldn't be there. Tunnels twisted in directions I didn't recognize. This doesn't make sense, I panted, leaning against a wall to catch my breath. We should have reached the main chamber by now. Luce checked her compass, frowning when the needle spun wildly. Could we have taken a wrong turn? Impossible, I said. I know every inch of this cave system. Then how do you explain this? She pointed her light down a tunnel that stretched before us, a tunnel with stalactites hanging from the ceiling like stone teeth. Stalactites that definitely hadn't been there yesterday. Before I could answer, a rumble shook the cave, stronger than before. Small rocks rained down from above. One hit my shoulder and I winced. We need to find another way, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The vibrations are getting worse. Michael, Luce whispered, her light fixed on something. Behind me, don't move. I turned slowly and my blood went cold. 20 feet away, a group of blind cavefish floated in a shallow pool, perfectly arranged in a circle. Every single one was dead, their pale bodies glowing slightly in our light. In the center of the Circle was a drawing scratched into the mud, fresh, new. A stick figure with too many limbs and a head that split open like a flower. The clicking sound came again, louder, closer, click, click, click. We should leave this for later, I said, backing away from the pool. Find the main chamber first. Luce didn't argue. We moved quickly, following a passage that seemed vaguely familiar to me. The sweet, rotten smell grew stronger, making my eyes water. My equipment's going crazy, Luce muttered, showing me her devices. The temperature gauge read 20 degrees, impossibly cold for a cave that should maintain a steady 54 degrees year-round. The radiation detector still pushed into the red. I pulled out my radio again, desperate to warn the surface. Base, this is Buster. Do you copy? There's something down here. You need to stop all tours immediately. Static hissed, then a voice answered, but not from the ranger station. Mikhail, it whispered, my name stretched into something wrong. The voice sounded almost like my father's, but with odd pauses between syllables. I've been waiting. I dropped the radio like it had burned me. What's wrong? Luce asked, eyes wide. Nothing, I lied, not wanting to scare her more. Just more interference. We pushed forward until we finally reached a chamber I recognized, the cathedral room, a massive space with a ceiling so high our lights couldn't reach it. Relief washed over me. I knew where we were now. The main tourist path is just through. There, I said, pointing to a wide passage. We can follow it back to the entrance. The words had barely left my mouth when stalactites began to shatter above us, breaking off and crashing down without being touched. We pressed ourselves against the wall, covering our heads as stone daggers rained around us. In the sudden silence that followed, we heard voices, human voices. And this limestone formation is over 2 million years old. A tour guide's cheerful explanation echoed through the chamber. Oh no, I whispered. The morning tour group. Luce grabbed my arm. We have to warn them. We hurried toward the voices, nearly colliding with the last person in the group, a teenage boy filming everything on his phone. He jumped when he saw us. Whoa! You guys scared me, he said, laughing. The tour guide, Sarah, a new hire who'd only been working at the cave for a month, frowned when she saw us covered in dust and looking panicked. Ranger Foster, is everything okay? The 11 tourists turned to stare at us, normal people with cameras and water bottles, completely unaware of the danger. There's been a change of plans, I said, trying to sound professional despite my racing heart. We need to evacuate the cave immediately. All of you, please follow me to the nearest exit. Sarah looked confused. But we just started the tour. What's going on? Before I could answer, all our lights flickered simultaneously. The temperature plummeted so fast we could see our breath cloud in front of our faces. What was that? A woman asked, clutching her husband's arm. Please, I said, my voice more urgent now. We need to leave, now. A man in an expensive-looking jacket scoffed. I paid good money for this tour. Is this some kind of joke? Sir, I assure you. My words cut off as my light caught something moving on the chamber ceiling. Something that shouldn't be there. Pale, skeletal figure clung to the rock above. Its body bent at impossible angles. It had no eyes that I could see, but its head was crowned with twitching antenna-like growths that seemed to be sensing us. I slowly raised my hand, motioning everyone to be quiet and still. Too late. The teenage boy had seen it too. He pointed his phone upward, then screamed. The creature's head snapped toward the sound. In the light of a dozen flashlights, we all saw what happened next. Its body unfolded like some horrible spider, and it scuttled across the ceiling with jerky, insect-like movements. Screams erupted from the group. People pushed and shoved, trying to run back the way they'd come. Stay together, I shouted. But panic had already taken over. The creature dropped to the floor, blocking the exit path. Up close, it was worse than I could have imagined. Its skin was a patchwork of different textures and colors, like it had pieces of other. Things grafted onto it. Where its face should be, features shifted and changed. momentarily forming a human mouth, then eyes, then melting back into blank smoothness. Click, click, click. The sound came from inside it. "What is that thing?" Sarah cried, backing away. I didn't have an answer. All I knew was we needed weapons, and we needed to move. "This way," I called, pointing to a side passage I knew led toward the underground river. Water might slow it down. "Give us a chance." Luce and about half the tourist group followed me. The others scattered in different directions, their screams echoing through the chambers. The creature hesitated, its antenna twitching as if deciding which prey to chase first. It chose a heavy-set man who had tripped on a rock. I watched in horror as it moved toward him with impossible speed. "Run!" I shouted to my group. "Don't look back!" But I couldn't follow my own advice. I turned just in time to see the creature pounce on the fallen man. It didn't bite or claw like an animal would. Instead, it seemed to embrace him, wrapping long limbs around his body while secreting a thick, glue-like substance that hardened almost instantly. The man's screams stopped abruptly as the creature lifted its now cocooned prey and skittered up. The wall with him, disappearing into a narrow crack in the ceiling. The whole attack took less than 10 seconds. "Move!" I urged the remaining people, my voice hoarse with fear. "It will come back." As we fled deeper into the cave, I couldn't shake the image of that faceless head suddenly forming a mouth that had smiled just before it took its victim, a mouth that looked disturbingly like my father's. Our group moved quickly through the narrow passage, me, Luce, and 6 terrified tourists. Sarah, the tour guide, kept counting heads, her voice shaking. "We're missing 5 people," she whispered to me. "The Wilsons, Mr. Chen, and that couple from Florida." I nodded grimly. There was nothing we could do for them now, except try to get help. If they'd run in different directions, finding them in this massive cave system would be nearly impossible. "Where are we going?" asked a woman, clutching her young daughter's hand. Both were pale with fear, but holding it together better than most. "There's an emergency exit through the underground river system," I explained. "It's not on the tour maps, but it'll get us out." What I didn't say was that the path would take us deeper into the cave first. Sometimes you have to go down to go up. We reached a steep slope that led to the lower chambers. The air grew colder as we descended, our breath clouding in front of us. The lights on our helmets cast long, jumping shadows that made everyone jumpy. "What was that thing?" Luce asked quietly as we walked side by side. "I don't know," I admitted. "But it's been here a long time. Those Native American drawings we saw, I think they were warnings about it." The tunnel opened into a vast chamber with a slow-moving underground river cutting through its center. Normally the sight would be beautiful, crystal-clear water reflecting our lights. But today, the water had that same rainbow sheen we'd seen earlier, moving against the current in swirling patterns. "We need to cross here," I said, pointing to a narrow, natural bridge of stone. "Single file, watch your step, it's slippery." As our group carefully made their way across, I heard something that made my blood run cold. Clicking sounds, echoing from multiple directions. Not just one creature, several. "They're coming," I warned. "Move faster." The last person had barely crossed when the first creature appeared at the chamber entrance. The same pale, joint-twisted nightmare we'd seen before, but it wasn't alone. 2 more followed, their antenna-like protrusions twitching as they sensed us. "Run!" I shouted, no longer caring about being quiet. We sprinted down a narrow passage, the creatures scuttling after us with that horrible insect-like movement. Their bodies seemed to fold and unfold as they squeezed through spaces that should have been too small for them. My bad leg screamed in pain, but fear pushed me forward. I led the group around a corner and into a small side chamber. "Help me!" I called to the others, pushing against a large boulder near the entrance. Luce and 2 of the stronger tourists joined me. Together, we rolled it across the passage entrance, sealing it off. Scratching sounds came from the other side almost immediately, sharp claws or nails scraping against rock. "Will that hold them?" Sarah asked, her eyes wide. Not for long, I admitted, but it buys us time. I turned to examine our surroundings, trying to remember the cave layout. The chamber we'd entered was unfamiliar, not part of any map I knew. The walls were covered with strange symbols carved into the stone, similar to the Native American drawings, but older, deeper. And at the center of the room stood what looked like an altar of some kind, a flat stone table surrounded by smaller rocks arranged in a perfect circle. "What is this place?" Luce whispered, her scientific curiosity temporarily overcoming her fear. I shook my head. "I've never seen it before." The teenage boy who had filmed the creature earlier pointed his flashlight at the ground near the altar. "Look at all this stuff." Scattered around the base of the altar were objects, hundreds of them. Watches, rings, backpacks, shoes, cameras, belongings from different eras, some so old they'd begun to fossilize into the cave floor. "My God," Sarah whispered. "Are these from missing persons?" I finished for her. "People who disappeared in the cave." I moved closer, my light scanning the grim collection, and then I saw it. A watch with a cracked face and a worn leather band. I'd seen it 1,000 times in old family photos. My father's watch. My hands trembled as I picked it up. The watch had stopped at 3:17, the same time recorded in the final entry of my father's journal. For 18 years, I'd wondered what happened to him in these caves. Now I knew the creatures had taken him. A strange calm settled over me, the calm that comes when your worst fears are finally confirmed. "We need to keep moving," I said, pocketing the watch. "There's another way out through that passage." I pointed to a dark opening on the far side of the chamber. The scratching at our makeshift barricade grew louder. Small pieces of rock began to fall away as the creatures broke through. "They're getting in!" the young girl cried. As our group hurried toward the exit passage, Luce paused to examine the altar more closely. "Michael, look at this." Carved into the altar's surface was a crude map of the cave system, but with passages and chambers that didn't exist on any official survey. One chamber, larger than the others, was marked with the same multi-limbed figure we'd seen earlier. "It's showing us where they live," Luce said. "Their nest or hive or whatever you'd call it." A loud crack came from the boulder blocking the entrance. A pale, clawed hand pushed through the gap. "Leave it," I urged Luce. "We have to go." We ran into the new passage, which sloped steeply downward. The path was treacherous, slick with moisture and barely wide enough for one person. The woman's daughter slipped and would have fallen if I hadn't caught her arm. "Thank you," the woman breathed, pulling her daughter close. The passage ended at the edge of an underground lake, one of the deepest parts of the cave system. The water stretched into darkness, its surface dead calm. "Now what?" someone asked. "We can't cross that." I checked my watch. We'd been down here for nearly 4 hours. By now, people on the surface would know something was wrong. Search parties would be organizing. "There should be emergency rafts stored near here," I said, scanning the shoreline. Part of the rescue equipment. Luz spotted them first. 2 inflatable rafts folded and sealed in waterproof bags. We quickly pulled them out and began inflating them. The clicking sounds echoed down the passage behind us, getting closer. "Hurry!" Sarah urged as we worked the hand pumps. The first raft was ready. We loaded the woman and her daughter, plus 2 other tourists. I handed them paddles. "Head straight across," I instructed. "There's a passage on the other side that leads up to elevator shaft, a vertical tunnel that reaches the surface. Rangers will be searching there." As they pushed off from shore, we frantically inflated the second raft. The clicking grew louder, accompanied by that sickly sweet smell. "They're coming!" the teenage boy cried, pointing his light down the passage. 3 creatures crawled into view, moving faster than before, as if excited by the chase. In the darkness behind them, more shapes moved. 5, maybe 6 more. The second raft wasn't fully inflated, but it would have to do. "Everyone in!" I shouted. So now, Luz, Sarah, the teenager, and the last tourist piled in. I stayed on shore. "Michael, come on," Luz called, reaching out her hand. I shook my head. "Too heavy. It'll sink with all of us." Before they could argue, I shoved the raft away from shore. The creatures were almost upon us. "But how will you?" Luz began. "I know another way," I lied. "Go! Get help!" Tears streamed down Luz's face as she realized what I was doing. "I'll come back for you." The creatures reached the shoreline, their pale bodies gleaming in the light from my helmet. 9 of them spread out along the water's edge, clicking excitedly. As they watched the rafts move away, I backed up against the cave wall, searching desperately for a way out. There was a narrow crack in the rock face, maybe just big enough for a person to squeeze through. It was my only chance. The closest creature turned toward me, its head tilting curiously. For a moment, its blank face shifted, features rearranging, into a horribly familiar pattern. My father's face stared back at me from the creature's head. "No," I whispered, horror and grief washing over me. "Dad!" The thing that wore my father's face made a sound, not clicking this time, but words spoken in a dry, cracking voice. "Son, join us." I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The creature reached for me with long, jointed fingers. That's when Luz did the bravest, most foolish thing I've ever seen. From the middle of the lake, she stood up in the raft and aimed her flare gun, standard equipment for cave emergencies. The red flare arced through the darkness and hit the ceiling, directly above the creatures. The blast wasn't huge, but in the ancient, unstable cave, it was enough. With a deafening crack, the ceiling began to collapse. Massive chunks of limestone crashed down between me and the creatures. One of them was crushed instantly. The others scattered, their clicking turning to high-pitched shrieks. I dove for the crack in the wall, squeezing my body through just as the passage behind me filled with fallen rock. Dust choked the air, and for a moment I thought I would suffocate. Then I felt a breeze, faint but unmistakable. Fresh air from somewhere ahead. I pushed forward through the tight passage, scraping my skin raw against the rough stone. My helmet light flickered and died, leaving me in total darkness. Still I crawled on, following that whisper of fresh air. After what felt like hours, the passage widened slightly. My fingers found a ledge above me, and with the last of my strength, I pulled myself up. Moonlight, the most beautiful sight I'd ever seen, filtered through a narrow opening above. I was in a sinkhole about half a mile from the main cave entrance. Somehow, I'd found a way out that wasn't on any map. As I dragged myself from the hole and collapsed on the grass under the night sky, a terrible thought hit me. Luz had sacrificed herself to save me. She'd caused the cave-in knowing she might never find her own way out, and the things in the cave, they were still down there, waiting, hunting, growing. With my father's watch clutched in my hand, I passed out under the stars. I woke up in a hospital. Bed, white walls, beeping machines, the smell of disinfectant. For a moment, I thought the whole cave nightmare had been a bad dream. Then I saw the cuts and scrapes on my arms, the bandages wrapped around my hands, the bruises marking every inch of my body, all of it real. A doctor came in, a kind-faced woman with tired eyes. "Mr. Foster," she said, checking my chart. "How are you feeling?" "The people from the cave." I rasped, my throat dry as dust. "Did they make it out?" She hesitated just long enough for me to know the answer before she spoke. 4 tourists were rescued from the lake chamber. The woman and her daughter and 2 others. "And Luz?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Luz Rodriguez?" The doctor shook her head gently. "I'm sorry. The rescue teams found no sign of her or the others." I closed my eyes, grief washing over me. Luz had saved my life and I couldn't save hers. "There was a cave-in," the doctor continued. "They're saying it was caused by an earthquake. Quite unusual for this area, but it happened. The entire lower section of Mammoth Cave has been sealed off." "It wasn't an earthquake," I said. "It was them, the creatures living in the cave." The doctor's expression shifted slightly. That look people get when they think you're not quite right in the head. Mr. Foster, you've been through a traumatic experience. Your mind might be trying to make sense of it in ways that... I know what I saw, I interrupted. We all saw them. Ask the survivors. She patted my hand. You should rest now. We can talk. More later. Over the next few days, I learned more about what happened after I escaped. The 4 tourists who made it out told stories about pale creatures hunting us through the cave. But with no bodies found and no evidence beyond their word, officials blamed the tragedy on natural causes, an unexpected earthquake triggering a cave-in. 7 people dead or missing. The second worst disaster in Mammoth Cave's history. I kept trying to make them understand the truth. I showed them my father's watch, tried to explain about the creatures that had taken him 18 years ago. The same creatures that now had, Luz and the others. No one believed me. The watch was just an old watch, they said. My father had probably dropped it during his final expedition. When park officials interviewed me, I tried again to tell them what really happened. I warned them that the creatures were still down there, that they'd been taking people for centuries. We need to seal off the entire cave system, I insisted, permanently. Instead, they suggested I take medical leave. For the trauma, they said. But I knew what they really meant. 2 weeks after I left the hospital, I got a visit from one of the tourists who survived, the woman with the young daughter. She sat across from me at a diner, her face drawn and tired. My daughter hasn't spoken since that day, she said quietly. But she draws. The same thing, over and over. She slid a folded paper across the table. I opened it slowly, my hands shaking. The drawing showed stick figures with too many limbs and heads that split open like flowers, exactly like the drawing we'd found in the cave. She wakes up screaming, the woman continued. Says they're talking to her in her dreams, calling her back to the cave. My mouth went dry. Has anyone else reported strange things? She nodded. The teenage boy, Jason. He swears he saw one of them outside his window last night, and I've been getting these weird phone calls, just clicking sounds when I answer. I showed her my father's book with all his notes, the parts where he described hearing voices before he disappeared, seeing things no one else could see. They don't stay in the cave, I told her. Not always, and I think they can change people, make them like the creatures. What can we do? She asked, fear plain on her face. I had no answer that would help her sleep at night. A month later, I was committed to Pine Grove Psychiatric Hospital. My delusions had become too much for my supervisors to ignore. I kept seeing things. A pale face at my window, antenna-like protrusions disappearing around corners. I kept hearing the clicking sounds at night. No one believed me. Not until the missing persons reports started coming in from other caves. Carter Caves in Kentucky, Blanchard Springs in Arkansas, Carlsbad Caverns in New Mexico. People vanishing without a trace. Strange drawings appearing on cave walls overnight. Unexplained radiation spikes in limestone formations. From my hospital room, I tracked the pattern through newspapers and TV reports. The creatures were spreading, moving through underground systems that connected beneath states, beneath entire regions. Then came the day when Dr. Whiting, my regular psychiatrist, came to visit. Something was different about him. His movements were stiff, jerky. His eyes never quite met mine. "How are we feeling today, Michael?" he asked, his voice slightly off, pauses in the wrong places. "Fine," I lied, watching him carefully. He leaned closer, his head tilting at an unnatural angle. "Any more thoughts about the cave creatures?" "No," I said quickly. "You were right. It was just trauma, hallucinations." He smiled, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. "Good. Very good." As he turned to write in his notebook, I saw it. A small patch on the back of his neck. The skin there was different. Pale, almost translucent, with tiny veins visible beneath, just like the creatures in the cave. When he left, I started writing this account. The full truth of what happened at Mammoth Cave. I need someone to know, to understand what's coming. They don't believe me, but they will. Soon, everyone will. Yesterday, I saw a news report about unusual limestone formations appearing in caves across 3 states, all bearing the same distinctive patterns I saw in Mammoth Cave. They're calling it a geological anomaly. I know better. The caves are spreading, connecting, hollowing out the ground beneath our feet, and now when I press my ear to the floor of my room at night, I can hear it. The faint but unmistakable sound coming from deep below the hospital. Click, click, click. There. Coming for me, and after me, they'll come for everyone else. The trees were talking that morning. Not the gentle creaking you get used to after 15 years as a ranger. No, this was different. I swear they were whispering. The cold hit my face as I stepped onto the porch of my cabin, coffee still steaming. In my hand, Rex, my German shepherd, wasn't acting right either. His ears were up, nose twitching. He wouldn't go past the steps. "What's wrong, boy?" I asked, but I already felt it too. Something was off in my forest. My name is Jack Morales. I've been a ranger at Redwood National Park for 15 years now. These ancient trees saved me after Korea, gave me a place to forget what happened to my brother. Most days, I know every sound, smell, and shadow in these woods, but not today. Today was wrong. I tapped the silver pocket watch in my jacket, my dad's watch. The minute hand was stuck at 6:17, though I'd wound it last night like always. Funny thing about time in the woods, it plays tricks on you. After you lose track of it once and someone dies because of it, well, you get careful about knowing. The time. The radio crackled at my hip as I clipped my badge to my chest. "Jack, you copy." It was Lena from headquarters, her voice cutting through static. "I copy." "What's up?" I said, eyeing the tree line. The morning mist hugged the ground in a way that didn't look right, swirling against the breeze. "Just checking in. You headed to the north sector today?" "That's the plan. Some hikers reported strange noises up by Devil's Creek Ravine." "Again?" "That's the 3rd report this month," she said. "Maybe take someone with you this time?" I laughed. "Got Rex. Best partner there is." But Rex wasn't agreeing. He stood at attention, a low growl rumbling in his chest as he stared into the trees. "I'll check in at noon," I told Lena, then hooked the radio back to my belt. The morning sun was trying to break through the canopy, creating spots of gold on the forest floor. Beautiful, if you didn't notice how the shadows seemed darker than they should be. The air smelled of pine and damp soil like always, but underneath was something else, something metallic, like old pennies. I patted my leg. "Come on, Rex. Let's go." He followed, but not happily. Can't say I blamed him. The scar on my left cheek itched like it always did when a storm was coming, though the forecast called for sun all week. 5 years since that logging accident nearly took my face off, and it still warned me about weather better than any meteorologist. As we headed deeper into the woods, I couldn't shake the feeling we were being watched. I'm not jumpy by nature, you can't be in this job. But the forest felt different today. The birds weren't singing right. The trails looked just slightly off, though I couldn't say exactly how. This was my home. I knew these trees better than I knew my own face in the mirror. So why did they suddenly feel like strangers? An hour into our patrol, the radio started acting up. Words got cut off, replaced by static that almost sounded like whispering. "Repeat that bass," I said, adjusting the dial. More static, then a child's laugh came through clear as day. I froze. We were miles from any campground. No kids should be out here. Rex's hackles stood straight up. That's when I noticed the tracks, or rather, the lack of them. This section of trail usually showed deer prints, raccoon paws, the occasional bobcat. Today, nothing. Like every animal had picked up and left smart animals. The temperature dropped suddenly. I could see my breath now, little clouds forming with each exhale. In June, in California. "Something's not right, Rex," I whispered, though I didn't need to tell him. His body was rigid, his eyes fixed on something between two massive redwoods. Ahead, I followed his gaze and saw nothing, just empty space. But Rex growled, a sound I'd only heard him make once before. The night we both heard those coyotes that sounded too much like crying children. That's when I noticed the scratches on the nearest tree trunk. 3 parallel lines, carved deep into the bark, at least 8 feet up. Too high for a bear, too neat for anything I knew lived in these woods. I reached for my flashlight, though it wasn't even noon. The forest had grown dark, as if the canopy had thickened overhead. But when I clicked the button, nothing happened. New batteries, dead as dirt. My hand moved to the knife on my belt instead. Rex whimpered, a sound that scared me more than his growling. This dog had faced down mountain lions without flinching. The watch in my pocket felt suddenly cold against my leg. When I pulled it out, the hands were spinning backward, and that's when I heard my brother's voice, calling my name from somewhere deep in the trees. My brother, who died in my arms in Korea 12 years ago. "Tommy?" I whispered, my heart pounding so hard I felt sick. It couldn't be him. Tommy died in my arms. I still had nightmares about his blood soaking through my uniform. Still woke up hearing him call my name as he slipped away. Yet there it was, again. "Jack, help me." My brother's voice, coming from deeper in the woods. Rex whined and pressed against my leg. Even he knew something was wrong. The air had turned so cold now that my fingers were going numb around my knife handle. "It's not real," I told myself, but my feet were already moving toward the sound. The forest had gone dead quiet. No birds, no insects, not even the sound of wind in the trees. Just silence thick enough to choke on. And still, that voice called, "Jack, please." I stopped near a clearing where sunlight should have been streaming down. Instead, the mist swirled in circles against the wind, like water going down a drain. The compass in my pocket was spinning wildly, the needle swinging as if it couldn't find north. "Show yourself," I shouted, hating how my voice shook. Something moved between the trees up ahead. Something tall, too tall. "Base, this is Morales," I said into my radio. "I'm at grid point 22 in the north sector. Something's..." But the radio just played back that child's laugh, followed by a song I hadn't heard since I was a kid. The one Mum used to sing when she tucked us in at night. No radio tower would be broadcasting that. Rex suddenly barked and took off into the undergrowth before I could grab his leash. "Rex, come back!" I yelled, crashing after him. I found him 10 minutes later, standing stiff-legged and growling at something on the ground. It was a deer, or what was left of one. The body was torn open but almost bloodless, like something had sucked it dry. The strangest part, no tracks around it, not even the deer's own tracks, like it had dropped from the sky. "Come on, boy," I said, pulling at Rex's collar. "We need to call this in." But my radio was dead now. Not even static came through. The mist was getting thicker, wrapping around the tree trunks like fingers. It moved in a way mist shouldn't move, almost like it was searching for something. For us, my training told me to mark a trail back to base. I cut my palm with my knife and smeared blood on a tree trunk. Old ranger trick, nothing shows up better than blood on bark. But when I looked back a minute later, the mark was gone, wiped clean. That's when the smell hit me, like roadkill left in the sun for days, mixed with something burning. It was so strong I gagged and pulled my shirt over my nose. Rex started barking wildly at nothing I could see. His fur stood up like porcupine quills. "What is it, boy?" I whispered, squinting into the fog. That's when I saw it, just for a second, between two giant redwoods. A shape that didn't make sense. Tall, maybe 8 or 9 feet. Skinny arms that hung too low, and on its head, I blinked and it was gone. But I'd seen enough. Those looked like antlers. My grandfather was half Yurok. He used to tell stories by the fire about forest spirits, things that got hungry, things that could wear your skin if they caught you, things that could sound like your loved ones to lure you deeper into the woods. Not real, I whispered again, but my mouth was dry as sand. A twig snapped behind me. I spun around, knife raised. Nothing there. Another snap, this time to my left. Nothing. It was playing with me. Rex growled, turning in circles, trying to face every direction at once. Poor dog didn't know where to look. I thought about making a run for it, but something told me that's exactly what it wanted, to see me run, to chase me. So I backed up slowly until I felt a massive redwood trunk behind me. At least now nothing could sneak up from behind. The watch in my pocket was ice cold now. When I checked it, both hands pointed to midnight, though it was barely noon. "Whoever you are," I called out, trying to sound braver than I felt, "this is federal land. You're trespassing." A laugh answered me. Not Tommy's voice now, but something that sounded like branches breaking. The fog parted slightly, and I saw it again. Standing between two trees about 50 yards away, not hiding now, its skin was pulled tight over bones that bent at wrong angles. Patchy fur or hair hung from its arms. Those antlers rose from its skull like twisted tree branches, sharp enough to skewer a man. Its face was the worst part. It looked almost human, but stretched too wide with too many teeth. It was watching me, waiting, and somehow I knew it was enjoying my fear. Rex saw it too. He snarled and charged before I could stop him. "Rex!" No, my dog, my brave, stupid dog, ran straight at the thing. But when he leaped to attack, he passed right through it, like it was made of smoke. Rex landed, confused, spinning around with a yelp. The thing moved, so fast I could barely see it, and suddenly it was right next to Rex. "Run!" I screamed, but it was too late. The creature didn't touch him. It just leaned down toward my dog, and Rex froze. His eyes rolled back, and he collapsed to the ground. I ran toward them, knife out, yelling every curse I knew. But the thing and Rex both vanished into the mist. The forest went silent again. I was alone. "Rex!" I called over and over, my voice echoing back at me. No answer came except the faint sound of a child's laughter from somewhere deep in the woods. I needed to get back to base, to get help. But when I turned around, I didn't recognize anything. These were trees I'd walked past 1,000 times, but somehow they all looked wrong now. The trail I'd followed was gone. I was lost in my own forest, and something was hunting me. I've been lost before. Once in the mountains near Seoul when our unit got separated, once during a forest fire my second year as a ranger, but never in my own section of woods. Not here where I knew every tree, rock and stream, yet here I was, turning in circles, nothing looking right. The cold had settled into my bones now. My breath made clouds in front of my face, even though it was June. The mist curled around my ankles like living smoke. "Rex!" I called again, my voice sounding small in the silence. I needed to think clearly. The ranger station was south. Without my compass working, I'd have to use the sun. But the sun was hidden now, though there wasn't a cloud in the sky. Just a strange dimness, like twilight coming too early. I picked a direction and started walking, keeping my knife out. Every few steps I looked behind me. That feeling of being watched hadn't gone away. If anything, it was stronger. After walking for what felt like an hour, I came to a small stream. Relief washed over me. I knew this water. Elk Creek. It would lead me back toward the ranger station if I followed it east. I knelt down to fill my canteen, and that's when I saw it. My own reflection in the water, except it wasn't right. My face looked older, tired. My eyes were sunken dark holes. And behind me in the reflection stood the thing with antlers, its long fingers reaching. For my shoulders, I spun around, slashing with my knife at empty air. Nothing there. When I looked back at the water, my reflection was normal again. Just me, with my scared eyes and the scar across my cheek. Playing tricks, I muttered, trying to calm my racing heart. It's playing tricks on you, Jack. I stood up and nearly fell over as a wave of dizziness hit me. The forest seemed to spin. Around me, the trees bent at impossible angles, their branches reaching down like arms. Then I heard voices. Is this the right trail? The map says it should connect with the main path just ahead. People. Real people. Not voices in my head or from my past. I moved toward the sound, careful to stay quiet. I didn't know if I wanted to be found by people or not. What if it was another trick? Through a gap in the trees, I saw them. A young couple with hiking gear. The man had a red backpack and a camera around his neck. The woman wore a blue cap and carried a walking stick. They looked so normal, it made my chest hurt. "Hello," I called, out deciding I had to warn them. They both jumped, startled. "Oh, thank God," the woman said when she saw my uniform. "A ranger. We were starting to think we were lost." "You need to leave," I said, walking toward them. "Right now, the trail back. To the parking lot is—" I stopped, realizing I had no idea where we were. "Just follow me. We all need to get out of here." The man frowned. "What's going on? Is there a fire?" "Something's in the woods," I said, knowing how crazy I sounded. "Something dangerous." They exchanged a look I knew well. The one people give when they think someone's lost their mind. "Did you hurt yourself?" the woman asked, pointing at my hand. I looked down. My palm was still bleeding from when I'd tried to mark the trail. It looked worse than it should have, the cut deeper and redder than before. "I'm fine," I said. "But we're not safe here. What are your names?" "I'm Melissa," the woman said. "This is Dan, Jack Morales, Senior Ranger. How far in did you hike today?" "About 3 miles from the visitor center," Dan said, still looking nervous. "We were heading to Devil's Creek Falls." My blood went cold. "That's not possible. Devil's Creek is 15 miles north of the center." "No!" Melissa insisted, pulling out a map. "Look, we're right here." She pointed to a spot near the creek. I stared at the map. It was a park map, all right, but all wrong. Trails were in the wrong places. Landmarks had different names. It was like looking at a map of a park that didn't exist. "Where did you get this?" I asked. "At the visitor center this morning," Dan said. "The ranger there gave it to us, but I knew for a fact nobody had worked the visitor center desk today. It was closed for repairs." Before I could tell them this, a sound echoed through the trees. Rex, barking. He was alive. "My dog," I said. "That's my dog. He's this way." I started toward the sound, and after a moment's hesitation, the hikers followed. "Should we be going deeper into the woods if there's danger?" Melissa asked. She was right, but I couldn't leave Rex. "Just stay close," I said. The barking led us to a small clearing. In the center stood a fire lookout tower, one that shouldn't have been there. The old tower had burned down years ago during a lightning storm, and the Park Service never rebuilt it. Yet here it stood, looking aged and weathered, like it had been there for decades. Rex's barking was coming from inside. "Rex!" I called up. "Boy, are you in there?" The barking stopped. Instead came a low, mournful howl that made the hair on my arms stand up. "That doesn't sound right," Dan said, taking a step back. I knew he was right. It didn't sound like Rex anymore. It sounded like something pretending to be Rex. A crash came from the trees behind us, branches breaking under heavy footsteps. The mist swirled, thicker than before, cutting visibility down to just a few yards. "Inside," I ordered, pointing to the tower. "Now!" We ran to the wooden steps of the tower. They creaked dangerously under our weight. The door at the top was old and swollen with damp, but I rammed it with my shoulder, and it burst open. The inside of the tower was a single room with windows on all sides. It was empty, except for an old metal desk, a broken chair, and a wood stove. In the corner, no sign of Rex or anything else. I slammed the door shut behind us and dragged the desk in front of it. "What are we hiding from?" Melissa demanded, her voice shaking. "What's out there?" I went to the windows, looking out at the mist that now surrounded the tower completely. It was so thick I couldn't see the ground below anymore. It was like we were floating on a cloud. I don't know what it's called, I said honestly, but it's hunting us. As if on cue, the temperature in the room plunged. Our breath came out in white puffs. Frost began to form on the inside of the windows. "Oh God," Dan whispered, pressing his face to the glass. "There's something moving out there." We all looked. In the swirling mist, dark shapes moved around the tower, tall, thin, walking on two legs, but moving all wrong, like broken puppets. "My grandpa used to tell stories," I said, my mouth dry, "about spirits that lived in the deep woods, things that got hungry when people forgot to respect the forest." "You think that's what this is?" Melissa asked. "Some kind of spirit?" I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled out my knife and started scratching marks into the wooden floor. Symbols. My grandfather had taught me, circles with lines through them, triangles inside squares. I didn't know if they would work, but it was all I could think to do. Outside, something scraped against the side of the tower like huge claws dragging along the wood. Then came a voice, a perfect copy of mine. "Melissa," it called. "Dan, help. Me, I'm hurt out here." Dan's eyes went wide. Don't listen," I said. "It's not me. It's trying to trick you." The thing with my voice started crying, begging for help. It was hard to listen to. Melissa put her hands over her ears. "Make it stop!" Then it changed tactics. The voice became a child's. "Mommy? Mommy, I'm scared!" Melissa gasped. "That sounds like my nephew. How could it?" "It gets in your head somehow," I said. "Finds what scares you most." Dan was at the window again, wiping at the frost to see out. "There's a break in the mist," he said. "I can see the trail." "Don't trust it," I warned, but he was already moving the desk away from the door. "Dan, wait." Melissa grabbed his arm. "We can't stay here," he insisted. "It's freezing. We have no food, no water. We need to make a run for it while we can see the way out." I knew he was wrong. The thing was creating an illusion, trying to lure us out. But before I could stop him, Dan had pulled open the door and stepped onto the landing. "See," he called back to us, "the path is right there." He pointed down, but all I could see was swirling mist with no bottom. "Dan, come back inside," I said slowly, reaching for him. That's when I saw it rise up behind him, a massive shadow with spreading antlers, easily 10 feet tall. It moved so fast, I had no time to shout a warning. One moment Dan was there, the next he was yanked upward into the mist with a short, cut-off scream. Then came the sound of something wet hitting the wooden deck all around us. I looked down to see dark droplets, frozen solid and red. Blood. Dan's blood falling like hail from somewhere high above us. Melissa screamed. I pulled her back inside and slammed the door. We were trapped now, just the two of us, and outside, the thing with antlers waited. Melissa hadn't stopped shaking since Dan disappeared. She sat with her back against the wall, knees pulled up to her chest, staring at nothing. "He's not dead," she kept whispering. "He can't be dead." But we both knew. Those frozen drops of blood told the whole story. Night was falling fast outside, much faster than it should have. The mist pressed against the windows like it was trying to get in. Every few minutes, something heavy would move around the tower, making the whole structure creak and sway. "What is that thing?" Melissa finally asked, her voice small and broken. I sat down beside her, keeping my knife ready. The symbols I'd carved into the floor seemed to be working. At least the thing couldn't get inside. But we couldn't stay here forever. "My grandfather called it a Wendigo," I said. "It's a spirit that was once human. Someone who broke a great taboo." "Like what?" I hesitated. "In the old stories, it was someone who ate human flesh. They become twisted, always hungry, never satisfied." Melissa looked sick. "You really believe that?" "I don't know what I believe anymore." I pulled out my pocket watch. The hand still pointed to midnight, frozen in place. "But something unnatural is out there. Something that can mess with time, with space." The tower groaned as wind picked up outside. Through the windows, I could see the trees bending unnaturally, their branches all pointing toward us like accusing fingers. "Do you have family?" I asked, trying to distract her from the noises. Melissa nodded. "My parents in Seattle, a sister in Portland." Her voice caught. "Dan and I were supposed to be on vacation, just a 3-day hiking trip. We'll get out," I promised, though I had no idea how. "When dawn comes, it might get weaker. That's how it works in the stories." "If dawn comes," she said. It was a fair point. Time didn't seem to be working right here. The radio at my belt suddenly crackled too. Life, making us both jump. "Jack! Come in, Jack!" The voice was broken up by static, but it sounded like Lena from the ranger station. I grabbed it. "Lena, this is Jack. We're trapped in the old fire tower. There's something... Can't hear you." Her voice faded, in and out. "Search party, looking since yesterday." Yesterday. I'd only been out here a few hours. "Send help to the old fire tower," I said clearly. 2 survivors, 1 casualty, extremely dangerous situation. The only answer was more static, then a sound that made my blood run cold. Rex whimpering, followed by a wet, tearing noise. I turned the radio off. Melissa stared at me with wide eyes. "It's not real," I told her. "The thing is playing tricks." "What if it was real?" she asked. "What if help is coming?" I didn't answer. False hope could be more dangerous than no hope at all. Something scraped. Across the roof. Long, dragging steps moving back and forth. Dust fell from the ceiling. The temperature dropped even more, so cold now that my fingers were going numb. "Jack! Melissa!" came a voice from outside, Dan's voice. "Please, let me in. I'm hurt, but I'm alive." Melissa started to stand, but I grabbed her arm. "It's not him." "But what if..." "It's not him," I said firmly. "I saw what happened." The voice changed then, becoming something else, a guttural growl that no human throat could make. "I see your fear," it said, each word precise and wrong. "I taste it, sweet, rich, like marrow in bone." The windows rattled as something pressed against them, leaving frost patterns on the glass. Through the ice, I could make out a face, or something like a face. Stretched skin over a skull, eyes sunken and glowing faintly. Antlers scraped against. "The roof. What's the longest you've gone without sleep, Jack Morales?" the thing asked, its voice now smooth and almost friendly. "In Korea, wasn't it? 3 days straight during the retreat? You started seeing things then, too." It knew things about me, things I'd never told anyone. "Don't listen," I told Melissa. "It gets in your head." "I've been in your head for months, Ranger," the thing said. "Every time you woke from nightmares, every time you heard noises in the woods that didn't make sense. I've been watching, waiting, learning what scares you." "Why?" I demanded. "Why us?" A sound like branches breaking, its laugh. "Because you're alone, because you're broken. The damaged ones taste better." I turned to Melissa. "Cover your ears. Don't listen to it." She pressed her hands over her ears, tears streaming down her face. "She doesn't need to hear me," the voice said. "I'm already inside her mind, too. Did she tell you about the baby she lost last year? How she blamed herself? How she came to these woods, hoping to feel something again?" Melissa gasped and pressed her hands harder against her ears. The thing was trying to turn us against each other, make us vulnerable. I wouldn't let it. "Stay strong," I told her. "It feeds on fear, on pain. Don't give it what it wants." The windows frosted over completely now, blocking our view. But I could still see shadows moving outside, circling the tower. More than one shadow. The thing had friends, or it was making copies of itself. "I have your dog," the voice said. "Poor loyal Rex. He's still alive, you know. Would you like to hear him?" Rex's bark came then, but wrong, like someone had recorded it and was playing it too slowly. My fists clenched. "When the sun comes up," I said to the thing, "you're going to regret this," that laugh again. "The sun isn't coming up, Jack, not for you, not ever again. As if to prove its point, the darkness outside seemed to deepen, becoming something solid and alive. The tower creaked and swayed as wind battered it from all sides. Melissa was praying now, whispering words over and over. I found myself reaching for the watch in my pocket, holding onto it like it could somehow protect me. Then came a new sound, a low, vibrating hum that made my teeth ache. The windows and walls began to shake. "What's happening?" Melissa cried. The tower was coming apart, nails pulled free from wood with high-pitched squeals. The floorboards warped and buckled. The thing was tearing our shelter down around us. I grabbed Melissa's arm and pulled her toward the trapdoor in the floor, the emergency exit. It led to a ladder on the side of the tower. "We have to go," I said, "but it's out there. We don't have a choice." I yanked the trapdoor open. Cold air rushed up along with thick mist that spilled into the room like water. I couldn't see anything below, not the ladder, not the ground, just swirling white. The roof groaned and a beam cracked overhead. "Now!" I urged, helping Melissa through the opening. "Climb down. I'm right behind you." She disappeared into the mist. I heard her feet on the metal rungs of the ladder. Something huge slammed against the side of the tower, nearly knocking me off my feet. The windows all shattered at once, sending glass flying everywhere. Through the broken openings, those twisted shadows began to pour in like smoke. I jumped through the trapdoor, grabbing for the ladder. My hands found cold metal, and I started climbing down. The mist so thick I couldn't even see Melissa below me. "Keep going!" I called to her. "Don't stop!" The tower creaked one final time above me, and then came a deafening crash as the whole structure collapsed. Debris rained down, missing me by inches. Then silence. "Melissa," I called softly. No answer. I kept climbing down, but the ladder seemed to go on forever. My arms ached, my fingers numb from cold. The wound on my palm had reopened, leaving bloody prints on each rung. Finally, my foot touched solid ground. But when I looked around, I wasn't in the forest anymore. I was standing on a beach of grey sand. Ahead of me stretched an ocean of mist, rolling in like waves. Behind me, there was nothing but more mist. No tower, no forest, no Melissa. I was alone in a place that couldn't exist. "This isn't real," I said out loud, my voice swallowed by the fog. "You're playing tricks." "Is it tricks, Jack?" came Tommy's voice from somewhere in the mist. "Or is this what death looks like?" My brother stepped out of the fog. He looked just like the last time I saw him, young in his uniform, with that smile that never quite reached his eyes after we'd been in combat for a few months. "You're not Tommy," I said, gripping my knife tighter. "No," he agreed, his form shifting, stretching taller. The uniform melted away, leaving that leathery skin and protruding bones. The antlers grew from his skull like branches reaching for the sky. "But I know how much you miss him, how much you blame yourself." I backed away as the thing that wasn't my brother came closer. "He died because you lost track of time," it said. "You were supposed to call in air support at exactly 600, but your watch stopped. You were 4 minutes late. Just 4 minutes." I swallowed hard. It was true, all true. "That's why you check that watch constantly, isn't it? Why you wind it every night, even though it never keeps time right anymore? Why you came to these woods to hide from what you did?" "Stop," I whispered. The thing was right in front of me now, towering over me, its breath visible in the cold air. "Rotten and sour. I can give him back to you," it said. "I can give you peace. Just stop fighting, accept what's coming." For a moment, just a moment, I was tempted. I was so tired of carrying the guilt, so tired of the nightmares, so tired of being alone. But then I thought of Rex, of Melissa, of Dan. "No," I said, raising my knife. "I don't want anything from you." The creature's face, if you could call it that, twisted in what might have been anger. It reached for me, with long, bony fingers. "Then I'll take everything from you instead," it growled. I slashed with my knife, but it passed through the creature like it was made of smoke, Its hand closed around my throat, lifting me off the ground. The cold of its touch burned like fire, spreading through my body, turning my blood to ice. The world started to go dark around the edges. I couldn't breathe. This was it. This was how I died. But as my consciousness began to fade, I felt something warm in my pocket. The watch. It was pulsing with heat, glowing faintly through the fabric of my uniform. With my last bit of strength, I pulled it out and pressed it against the creature's arm. The thing screamed, a sound like trees being torn apart by wind. It dropped me and recoiled, smoke rising from where the watch had touched it. I fell to my knees, gasping for air. The watch in my hand was ticking again, the hands spinning rapidly forward. And with each tick, the world around me seemed to flicker, the mist beach fading in and out like a bad TV signal. "No!" the creature howled, lunging for me again. But the watch burned brighter, and I held it up like a shield. The creature stopped, just short of touching it again. "You can't have me," I told. "And you can't have any of us." Light began to grow behind me, warm golden light that pushed back the mist. The creature hissed and retreated, its form becoming less solid. I turned and saw what looked like a tear in the air itself, a hole in this nightmare place that showed trees, real trees, with sunlight filtering through their branches. Dawn, it was dawn in the real world. I stumbled toward the opening. The watch still held out before me. The creature shrieked again, a sound of rage and hunger. "This isn't over, Jack Morales," it said. "I'll be waiting when you come back to the woods. And you will come back. They always do." I didn't look back. I stepped through the tear in reality and felt real air fill my lungs, warm and sweet. Birds were singing. The forest looked normal again. The path beneath my feet was one I recognized, the trail that led back to the ranger station. I looked down at the watch in my hand. It was ticking normally, the hands showing 6:17 a.m. My father's watch had saved me somehow, the one thing the creature couldn't corrupt or control. But as I started walking back towards safety, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd left something important behind in that other place. Something I should have saved. And somewhere deep in the forest, I swear I heard a dog bark once, the sound echoing among ancient trees that now seemed to be watching my retreat with patient, hungry eyes. I made it back to the ranger station just as the morning shift was arriving. They stared at me like I was a ghost. Apparently I'd been missing for 3 days, not one night. "Jack, where have you been?" Lena rushed over, her face pale with worry. "We've had search parties out since you missed your check-in." I looked down at myself. My uniform was torn and dirty. Dried blood covered my palm and sleeve. My face felt raw from cold I shouldn't have experienced in June. "I got lost," I said simply. What else could I say? Lost. You? In your own section? Lena didn't believe me. I wouldn't have believed me either. "There are hikers missing," I said. "Dan and Melissa. They need search teams in the north sector near Devil's Creek." "We already found a man matching that description," said another ranger, Pete. "This morning. It wasn't good, Jack." My stomach dropped. "And the woman, Melissa?" Pete shook his head. "No sign of a woman, just the man." They sat me down, gave me coffee, called the medic to look at my hand. They asked questions I couldn't answer, at least not with the truth. No one would believe what really happened out there. So I lied, said I got turned around in bad weather, said I found a hiker in trouble but couldn't save him, said I took shelter in a cave, not a tower that shouldn't exist. They nodded and took notes, but I saw the looks they gave each other. They thought I'd finally cracked. The war vet who spent too much time alone in the woods. The man who talked to his dog more than people, speaking of which. "Rex," I said suddenly. "Did anyone find my dog?" More shared glances. "No, Jack," Lena said gently. "No sign of Rex." I nodded, feeling numb. Part of me had known he wasn't coming back. They made me take 2 weeks off. Mandatory leave, they called it. Told me to see a doctor, get some rest. I nodded and agreed to everything. What was the point in arguing? I went home to my cabin on the edge of the park, tried to sleep in, my own bed. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw that thing with the antlers, heard its voice telling me it would be waiting. The first week I had visitors, other rangers checking in, a park psychologist who asked careful questions about my experience. Even the sheriff came by to ask about the dead hiker. I stuck to my story, got lost, bad weather couldn't save him. Nobody mentioned Melissa, like she never existed. By the second week, the visits stopped. I was alone with my thoughts and the constant feeling of being watched. I kept the curtains closed, kept my knife close, wound my father's watch every night. Even though it kept perfect time now, the nightmares got worse. In them, I was back in that misty beach place. But this time, I wasn't alone. Rex was there, and Melissa and Dan. They were all half changed, their skin stretched tight over their bones, small antlers beginning to sprout from their heads. "You left us there," they would say. "You left us to become like it." I'd wake up screaming, soaked in sweat despite the cold that seemed to fill my cabin no matter how high I turned up the heat. On the last day of my leave, I made a decision. I packed a bag with supplies, matches, food, extra knife, flashlight with fresh batteries. I put my father's watch in my pocket. I wasn't going back to work. I was going back to the woods, back to find what I'd left behind. The north sector was quiet when I entered it just after dawn. The summer day was bright and warm, birds singing in the trees. Nothing like the cold, silent forest I'd experienced before. I followed the trail toward Devil's Creek, my map marked with the spot where I thought the fire tower had been. A spot that, according to official park maps, was just empty forest. As I walked, I kept checking over my shoulder. That feeling of being watched was back, growing stronger with each step deeper into the woods. But nothing followed me. Nothing. I could see anyway. By midday, I reached the clearing where the tower should have been. There was nothing there, no tower, no collapsed ruins, not even a foundation. Just a grassy space surrounded by ancient redwoods, but the trees around the clearing were wrong. Their bark was blackened as if burned, though there had been no fire reported. And carved into each trunk, at exactly the same height, were 3 parallel lines. I put my hand on one of the marks. The wood was ice cold despite the warm day. "Rex?" I called out, my voice sounding small in the vastness of the forest. "Melissa?" No answer came, except the breeze moving through branches high above. Took out my father's watch. It was ticking steadily, both hands moving in perfect time. But as I stood there in that clearing, the minute hand began to slow. The second hand twitched back and forth, like it was fighting against something. "I know you're here," I said to the empty air. "I know you're watching." No response, but the temperature around me began to drop. My breath became visible. "I came back for them," I continued. "I'm not leaving without them." A laugh echoed through the trees, that same sound of branches breaking. The mist began to rise from the ground, swirling around my ankles. "They're mine." "Now," came the voice, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere. "Just as you will be in time." The watch in my hand grew warm, then hot. The hands began to spin backward, faster and faster. The world around me flickered, like a TV changing channels. For a brief moment, I saw the tower again, broken and tilted but still standing. I saw shapes moving in the mist, human but wrong. I saw Rex, his fur patchy, his eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Then everything snapped back to normal. The clearing, the blackened trees, the warm summer day. But the watch was still spinning backward, burning against my palm. I understood. Then, the watch was a door between worlds, between our reality and whatever nightmare place the Wendigo ruled. My father's watch, the thing I checked constantly, the object linked to my deepest guilt and fear. The creature had used my fears against me, but the watch had somehow protected me too. My connection to my father, to time itself, had given me a way back. Could it give Melissa and Rex a way back too? I clutched the watch tighter, ignoring the pain as it grew hotter in my hand. "I want to make a trade," I called out. The mist thickened around me, taking shape, that tall, skeletal form with spreading antlers. "You have nothing I want," it said, its voice clearer now, almost human but still wrong. "I have myself," I said. "Me for them. Let them go and I'll stay." The creature tilted its head, antlers catching the sunlight that somehow still filtered through the mist. "Why would you do this?" it asked, seeming genuinely curious. "Because I left them behind," I said. "Because it should have been me, not them." The same guilt I'd carried about Tommy. The same mistake, leaving others to die while I survived. The creature moved closer, towering over me. Its face was more human now, wearing features that looked almost like mine. "Your guilt is delicious," it said. "I have fed on it since you first entered my forest, but to willingly give yourself," it seemed to consider, "the willing ones change faster, become more like me." I swallowed hard. "Is that what happened to the others who never came back from these woods? They became like you." "Some," it admitted. "Others simply fed me. But you could join me, hunt with me." The thought made me sick. But if it meant saving Melissa and Rex, "Do we have a deal?" I asked. The creature reached out one long, bony hand. "We do." The watch in my palm burned white hot now. As the creature's fingers brushed mine, there was a sound like thunder. The world tore open around us, reality peeling back to reveal that grey beach and misty ocean. But it wasn't empty anymore. Shapes moved in the fog. People, animals, things that were neither. And among them, I saw a woman in hiking clothes and a German shepherd, both looking lost and faded like old photographs. "Melissa, Rex," I called. They turned, their faces lighting up with recognition and hope. But before I could reach them, the creature's hand closed around my wrist. Its touch was burning cold, sending pain shooting up my arm. "They go. You stay," it reminded me. "That was our deal." I nodded, fighting back tears, as I watched Melissa and Rex moving toward what looked like a tear in the air, a hole showing the real forest beyond. "Jack?" Melissa called, confused. "What's happening?" "Go!" I shouted. "Get through before it closes." Rex barked and ran toward the opening. Melissa hesitated, looking back at me. "What about you?" she called. "I'll be fine," I lied. "Just go. Tell them what happened here. Tell them to close the north sector." She looked like she wanted to argue, but Rex was barking frantically now, urging her toward the exit. With one last glance at me, she stepped through into the real world. The tear began to close immediately. The creature's grip on my wrist tightened. "Now," it said, "you are mine." But I had one more card to play. As the last sliver of real world was about to disappear, I threw my father's watch through the opening with all my strength. The creature screamed in rage, its form shifting wildly. "What have you done?" "Insurance," I said. Without the watch, there was no way back for me, but there was no way for the creature to follow them either. The door between worlds was closed. I could feel the cold seeping into my bones now, changing me. My skin felt tight. My joints ached. Hunger gnawed at me, a hunger I knew would never be satisfied. The creature loomed over me, its rage giving way to something like respect. "Clever," it said, "but it changes nothing. You will become like me, and then we will find another way out. We always do." "Maybe," I said, "but they're safe. That's what matters." Days passed in that misty place, or maybe years. Time didn't work right there. I could feel myself changing, parts of my humanity slipping away with each moment. The cold didn't bother me anymore. The hunger was my constant companion. Sometimes I saw others like me, half-changed things that had once been human, former hikers and rangers who had vanished in these woods over the years. We recognized each other, but didn't speak. What was there to say? I thought I'd forgotten what sunlight looked like until the day I felt a warmth on my face, a strange tickling in my palm. I looked down to see something glowing there, a perfect circle of light. As I watched, it expanded, growing larger until it was the size of a doorway. On the other side was the forest. The real forest, bathed in golden afternoon light, and standing just beyond, holding my father's watch, was Melissa. "Jack," she called, squinting into the mist. "Are you there? The watch? It's leading me to you." I wanted to go to her, to step through and feel real sunlight again, but I knew what I had become, what I would bring with me. Behind me, I felt the creature watching, waiting, hungry. "Go away, Melissa," I called, my voice rough from disuse. "It's not safe." "I brought help," she insisted. "People who know about these things. We can get you out." I shook my head, staying in the shadows. "It's too late for me, but you can help others. Close the North Sector. Tell people what happened. Jack, please," she begged. "At least let me see you." "You don't want to see me now," I said truthfully. "Just know that I'm still here, still watching." "The watch keeps finding you," she said. "It leads me back to this spot every time. I won't stop trying." I felt something warm inside me, something I thought had frozen solid. Hope, maybe, or just the memory of being human. "Keep the watch safe," I told her. "It's the only thing that holds it back." The doorway began to shrink as the watch's power faded. Soon it would close again. "I'll come back," Melissa promised as the opening narrowed. "I'll find a way to help you." Then she was gone, and I was alone in the mist again. But something had changed. I felt the weight of the creature's presence. Behind me, its anger like a physical thing. "She will return," it said, "and next time you will help me take her." I turned to face it, standing straight despite the new shape of my body. "No," I said simply. "I won't." The creature hissed, but there was uncertainty in its glowing eyes now. It had never encountered resistance from those it had changed before. "You have no choice," it insisted. "You are becoming like me." "Maybe on the outside," I agreed, "but not in here." I tapped my chest. "Never in here." For the first time, the creature seemed afraid. Not of me, but of what I represented. Hope, resistance, humanity that wouldn't die no matter how cold and hungry I became. I turned away from it and walked toward the place where the doorway had been. I couldn't open it from this side, but I could. Wait and remember, and fight against what I was becoming. Sometimes on quiet nights when the mist thins, I catch glimpses of the real world. I see rangers patrolling with special equipment, wearing protective charms. I see signs warning hikers away from the North Sector. I see Melissa sometimes, standing in the clearing with my father's watch, looking for me. The creature watches too, hungry but cautious now. It fears the watch, fears what Melissa and the others might do with their growing knowledge of its existence, and it fears me. Because every day I fight the hunger. Every day I remember who I was, what I was, and what I might be again if that doorway ever opens wide enough. So I wait in the mist between monster and man, watching, protecting in the only way I can. If you ever visit Redwood National Park and hear rangers warning you away from the North Sector, listen to them. If you feel a sudden cold spot on a warm day, turn back. If you hear voices calling you from places no one should be, cover your ears and run. But if you hear a man's laughter or see a park ranger uniform in the fog, don't be afraid. It's just me, Jack Morales, still on patrol, still protecting my forest, still human enough to care. For now. I wasn't supposed to survive that day. Sometimes I still wake up hearing their screams as the wall of snow crashed down, burying my entire team while somehow leaving me untouched. That's the thing about avalanches. They don't play fair. They Don't care who lives or dies, but this one felt different. Like it chose. My name is Abigail Winters, and for 15 years I've hidden myself away in Denali National Park, Alaska. Most people come here to see the beautiful mountains or spot wildlife. I came here to disappear. This morning started like any other. I woke before sunrise in my small cabin at the ranger station, made coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in, and stepped outside to watch the light hit the mountains. There's a moment each dawn when Denali's peaks turn gold and pink, like they're on fire from the inside. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, but today something was off. That's weird, I whispered to myself, squinting at the northern face of the mountain. While sunlight painted the rest of the peaks in warm colors, one section remained dark, like the light itself was avoiding it. In all my years here, I'd never seen anything like it. I grabbed my radio to check in with the weather stations. Base to Station 3. You seeing these conditions? Over. Static crackled then. Station 3 here. Temperature just dropped 40. Degrees in 5 minutes flat. Equipment must be busted. Over. But I knew the equipment wasn't wrong. I could feel it, that sudden bite in the air that made my breath catch. My fingers tightened around the small jade figurine in my pocket, the one Grandma gave me. She was Inuit and understood the mountains have spirits, some good, some not. I've developed what others call a sixth sense about weather changes. When you survive as long as I have in places this harsh, your body learns to notice things before instruments can. Right now, everything in me was screaming that something wasn't natural. Through my binoculars, I spotted perfect circles of dead trees near the tree line, frozen so quickly they'd shattered like glass. No storm or natural frost does that. Then I saw the wolves, a whole pack racing south, running like the devil himself was on their heels. Animals know things we don't. When they run, you should pay attention. The radio crackled again. This time from our new arrival, Dr. Victor Patterson, the glaciologist who'd been taking ice core samples for the past week. Abby, you need to see this. I'm at Thunder Basin. I found something impossible. I almost told him not to go to Thunder Basin. The local guides had been refusing to go near there for weeks, breaking their contracts and walking away from good money. When I asked why, the oldest guide just shook his head and said, "That place is awake now." I grabbed my custom survival pack, the one with experimental gear not approved for regular ranger use yet, and headed out. The strange darkness on the mountain seemed to grow deeper as I walked toward it, and the familiar landscape suddenly felt foreign, dangerous. Little did I know that by answering that call, I was walking straight into a nightmare that had been sleeping in the ice for thousands of years. A nightmare that was finally awake and hungry. A nightmare that had been waiting for me. The hike to Thunder Basin usually takes 3 hours. Today, I made it in 2, pushing myself harder than I should have. Something about Patterson's voice on the radio didn't sit right with me. The cold got worse as I walked. Not the normal Alaska cold that bites at your nose and cheeks. This was different. This cold seemed to reach inside me like it was looking for something. I found Patterson kneeling in the snow, his bright red parka making him easy to spot against the white landscape. His breath came out in thick clouds as he stared at something. On the ground. "What did you find?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't look up, just pointed. Footprints. I'd seen all kinds of tracks in my 15 years here. Bear, moose, wolf, lost hikers. But these were different. They started normally enough, human-sized and walking in a straight line. Then they did something impossible. They went straight up the side of a sheer ice wall, as if whoever made them could walk right up vertical surfaces like a fly. "That's not possible," I said, following the tracks with my eyes up to where they simply stopped halfway up the 200-foot cliff. "Exactly," Patterson said. His face was pale. "And that's not all." He led me to a patch of fresh ice he'd been studying. Trapped inside were birds. tropical birds with bright blue and yellow feathers, birds that had no business being in Alaska, frozen as if they'd been caught mid-flight. "They're perfectly preserved," Patterson said quietly. "But the weird thing is, when I melted a small sample..." He hesitated. "What?" The cells were still active, like they were only frozen seconds ago, not years. A sharp crack echoed across the basin, the sound of glacial ice moving. I'd heard it 1,000 times before, but today it sounded almost like laughter. "We should take samples and head back," I said. "Something's not right here." Patterson nodded, but I could see the scientist in him was excited despite the fear. He carefully packed ice samples into special containers. As we worked, my handheld weather meter showed the temperature dropping fast, too fast. 45 degrees, 30, 20. "Patterson, we need to move, now." He looked up. "Just 5 more minutes." I was about to argue when my radio crackled to life. Through waves of static, a voice came through. "Position unknown. Can't see. Through this blizzard. Requesting emergency evacuation from North Face." I grabbed my radio. "This is Ranger Winters. Identify yourself and your location." More static then. "Expedition Team Clayton. Temperature dropping. God, it's watching us." My blood went cold. The Clayton expedition was a group of climbers who had died on Denali in 1932. "That's impossible," I whispered. "What's wrong?" Patterson asked. Before I could answer, something caught my eye. Movement where nothing should be moving. About 50 yards away, a perfect circle of snow was swirling upward like a tiny tornado of ice crystals. "Don't move," I said, keeping my voice low. The swirling snow seemed to pause, as if listening. Then it changed direction, heading straight for us. "Run," I said, grabbing Patterson's arm. "Back to my snowmobile, now!" We ran, the snow crunching under our boots, my breath burning in my lungs. Behind us, the swirling snow moved faster, more purposefully. I risked a glance back and nearly stumbled. For just a second, I thought I saw a shape in the swirling snow. Tall, thin, with limbs too long to be human. We reached the snowmobile, and I fired it up. Patterson clutched his samples as we sped away, the engine roaring in the quiet landscape. "What was that?" he yelled over the noise. "I don't know," I shouted back, "but the locals won't come here for a reason." As we raced away, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't escaping. We were being allowed to leave with our samples, like something wanted us to bring a piece of it back with us. The sun was setting by the time we reached the station, casting long shadows across the snow. Inside, under the harsh fluorescent lights, Patterson's face looked grey with exhaustion and fear. "We need to examine these samples," he said, setting up his portable lab. "Something incredible is happening out there." I knew he was right about one thing. Something was happening, but incredible wasn't the word I would use. As night fell, the wind picked up, howling around the ranger station like a living thing trying to get in. And through my window, I could see that the darkness on the northern face of the mountain had grown larger, spreading like an ink stain across the snow. Whatever was out there, it wasn't staying put anymore. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those footprints walking up the vertical ice wall. I kept thinking about the radio message from climbers who died almost 100 years ago. Around 3 a.m., I gave up and went to check on Patterson. The light in his makeshift lab was still on. "Find anything?" I asked, bringing him a cup of coffee. He looked up, eyes red from lack of sleep. "Abby, these samples, they're impossible." He showed me his microscope. In the melted ice water, tiny bugs swam around, ancient bugs that shouldn't exist anymore. "These went extinct 10,000 years ago," he said quietly. "But they're alive." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. How is that possible? I don't know. "But there's something else." He pointed to his equipment. "My digital thermometer keeps failing, and look at this." He showed me his old-fashioned watch. The hands were moving backward. It started when I brought the samples in," he explained. "And not just running backward, it's speeding up, like time itself is different around these samples." Outside, the wind picked up again, rattling the windows like something trying to get in. "We should call this in," I said. "Get some experts." "Out here," Patterson shook his head. "With what proof? Moving watches? They'll think we're crazy." He ran a hand through his messy hair. "No, we need more evidence. We need to go back tomorrow. Every instinct told me that was a bad idea, but I knew he was right. No one would believe us without solid proof." "Fine, but we take proper gear and we stay together." That night my dreams were filled with snow that moved like water and ice that breathed like a living thing. Morning came grey and heavy with clouds. As we geared up, my radio suddenly buzzed to life. "Help. Coordinates." The voice was breaking up badly. I checked the signal. "It's coming from inside the glacier," I said in disbelief. The coordinates were for a spot that had been solid ice for a century. "That's where we're going," Patterson said, his eyes bright with excitement that worried me. We set out again, this time with more gear, emergency beacons, extra thermal clothing, flares. The strange darkness on the mountain had spread even further overnight, now covering almost the entire north face. As we approached our destination, our compasses went crazy. No matter which way we turned them, they all pointed to the same spot, a narrow crack in the glacier wall we hadn't noticed yesterday. "It's like it wants us to find it," Patterson whispered. The crack was just wide enough for a person to squeeze through. Inside was a cave of blue ice, more beautiful than anything I'd ever seen. But beauty can be dangerous in Alaska. I'd learned that lesson many times. "Look at this," Patterson called, his voice echoing strangely in the ice chamber. "In E." His hands was an old leather-bound journal. The pages were yellowed but perfectly preserved in the cold. "It's dated 1897, he said, flipping carefully through the pages. Then he went still. "What's wrong?" I asked. "This is my handwriting," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "And it talks about us, about finding the footprints yesterday, about coming to this cave today." I looked over his shoulder. The handwriting did look like his, and the journal described things only we could know. The exact pattern of the bird. We found frozen the exact words I'd said when we saw the footprints. "That's not possible," I said, but the words felt hollow. So many impossible things had happened already. Patterson kept reading, turning pages faster and faster. "It says something is trapped in the ice, something old. It calls it the Skinwalker." The temperature in the cave dropped suddenly. My breath fogged in front of my face, thicker than before. "It says the Skinwalker has been here for thousands of years," Patterson continued, totally focused on the journal now. "It says it can control ice and cold, that it takes people." A sharp crack echoed through the cave. A section of ice wall broke away, revealing another chamber deeper inside. Against my better judgment, we moved toward it. The new chamber was perfectly round, like something had carved it out. In the center stood a column of clear ice, and inside, "Oh my God," Patterson whispered. 3 climbers hung suspended in the ice, their faces frozen in expressions of terror. Their gear marked them as modern, not historical climbers. These were the 3 hikers reported missing last week. I stepped closer. One of them blinked. I stumbled backward. "They're alive in there." Patterson reached out to touch the ice. "The journal says the Skinwalker preserves its victims, keeps them conscious but unable to move, unable to die," as if responding to his words. The ice around us began to groan and shift. The temperature plummeted so fast it hurt to breathe. "We need to leave," I said. "Now." For the first time, I noticed how the walls of the chamber seemed to pulse slightly, like a heartbeat. The ice wasn't just ice. It was something else. Something alive. Patterson was still reading the journal, totally absorbed. It says the Skinwalker is waking up after centuries, that it needs 7 victims to complete some kind of cycle. I grabbed his arm. Patterson, we need to leave. He finally looked up, and his eyes were different, too bright, too excited. Don't you understand, Abby? This is the discovery of a lifetime, a creature that's existed since the Ice Age, with knowledge from thousands of years of human history. Behind him, I saw movement in the ice wall, a distortion like heat waves on a hot road, except this was cold, so cold it burned. And slowly something began to take shape in that distortion, something tall and thin with limbs too long to be human. Patterson, I said as calmly as I could, don't turn around, we're being watched. The air in the cave turned to crystals as we breathed, sparkling in the dim light. And the shape in the ice wall became clearer, a skeletal figure with skin that shifted between see-through and solid, showing organs preserved in ice underneath. We had found the Skinwalker, or maybe it had found us. Don't move, I whispered to Patterson. Don't even look at it. But Patterson couldn't help himself. He turned slowly, and I saw his face go white. The creature in the ice wall shifted, its body becoming more solid. It was human-shaped, but wrong. In every way, too tall, too thin, with arms that hung down past its knees. Its skin looked like clear ice in some places, showing frozen organs underneath. Where its eyes should be, there were just dark hollows filled with swirling frost. The Skinwalker, Patterson breathed, and the creature's head snapped toward him. At the sound of its name, in one smooth motion, I grabbed Patterson's arm and pulled him toward the exit. Move, now! We ran through the ice tunnel, our boots slipping on the smooth surface. Behind us I heard a sound like breaking glass. The creature was following. It's coming, Patterson shouted. Don't look back, I yelled. Years of survival training had taught me one thing. When running from a predator, looking back only slows you down. We burst out of the cave into the blinding white daylight. The sun had never looked so good. We made it, Patterson said, breathing hard. Then a woman's voice called from further up the glacier. Help! Please help me! I froze. It was my voice, my exact voice. A man's shout came from the opposite direction. Over here, this way, Patterson's voice perfect in every detail. It's mimicking us, I said, the realization making my stomach drop. Don't trust any voice you hear. The snow around us began to swirl upward, forming small funnels that danced across the surface. Each one moved with purpose, circling us, cutting off escape routes. What do we do? Patterson asked, his scientist's confidence finally cracking. Back to back, I ordered. Stay together no matter what. The small snow funnels joined together, creating a wall of swirling white that surrounded us completely. Through gaps in the snow, I could see the creature reforming again and again, appearing for a second before dissolving back into the storm. I reached for my flare gun, the brightest, hottest thing I had. If this thing was made of ice, maybe heat would hurt it. When I fire, run straight south, I told Patterson. Don't stop for anything. I fired the flare into the thickest part of the snow wall. The red light blazed through the white, and for a second I saw the creature clearly, its body flinching away from the heat, its face twisted in what might have been pain. Now! I shouted, and we ran through the gap the flare had created. We made it about 20 yards before the ice beneath my feet turned suddenly slick. I fell hard, the air knocked from my lungs. Patterson stopped to help me up, but froze, staring at something behind me. I turned to see the ice where I had fallen was changing, forming a perfectly smooth mirror surface. And rising up from that mirror, like it was being pulled from below, was me, an exact copy of me, made entirely of ice, down to the smallest detail. The scar on my left eyebrow, the silver in my hair, even the worn patches on my jacket. Patterson backed away. Abby! It's not me! I shouted, scrambling to my feet. That's not me! The ice copy smiled with my face, but not my expression. Cold, hungry, ancient. Its mouth opened, and my voice came out, "Run, Patterson. That thing is dangerous. Come with me." Patterson looked between us, confusion clear on his face. "I don't—" The ice copy reached for him with my hand. "Trust me." I grabbed a rock from the ground and threw it at the copy. It hit the shoulder, and the arm shattered like glass, only to reform seconds later from swirling snow. "Patterson, look!" I pointed at the ground. "It leaves no footprints." He looked down and saw the truth where I stood, my boots left deep, impressions in the snow. The copy of me stood on the surface, leaving no mark at all. "Run!" I yelled again, and this time he did. We made it back to the snowmobile, the swirling snow and my ice double following, but keeping distance, like it was studying us, learning. The ride back to base was a blur of white landscape and fear. By the time we reached the ranger station, heavy clouds had moved in, bringing with them the promise of a blizzard. Inside, Patterson paced the small common room while I tried to reach anyone on the radio. "Nothing but static. We need to tell someone what we found," he said. "Who's going to believe us?" I asked, the same words he'd used earlier now coming back to haunt us. Patterson went to check his ice samples, but returned minutes later, his face ashen. "They're gone." "What do you mean, gone?" "The containers are empty," he said. "Just water now." A heavy silence fell between us. Outside, the wind picked up, howling around the building. "What about the journal?" I asked. He pulled it from his pocket, but when he opened it, the pages were blank. All that remained was a damp leather cover. "It's like it never existed," he whispered. The lights flickered once, twice, then plunged us into darkness. "Power's out," I said, reaching for the emergency lantern. "Generator should kick in," but the generator didn't start. In the dim light of the lantern, I could see my breath clouding in front of me. The temperature was dropping rapidly inside the station. "That's not possible," Patterson said, checking the thermometer on the wall. "It's already 30 below in here." I moved to the window and wiped away the frost that was forming on the inside of the glass. Outside, the blizzard had arrived in full force, whipping snow into a white wall that hid everything beyond. "We're trapped," I said quietly. But being trapped with the storm outside wasn't what scared me. It was the growing certainty that we had brought something back with us, something that was already inside. As if confirming my fears, from somewhere in the darkened hallway came the sound of ice crackling as it formed, spreading slowly toward us. "Get the emergency heater," I told Patterson, trying to keep my voice steady, "and find anything that burns." The sound of ice forming in the hallway grew louder, a crackling, spreading noise like frozen fingers reaching toward us. Patterson fumbled with the camping heater while I gathered papers, books, anything that would burn. My years in the wilderness had taught me one thing clearly: cold kills, heat saves. "It's coming," Patterson whispered, staring toward the hallway. The temperature had dropped so low that the metal fixtures in the room were cracking. Frost covered every surface, growing before our eyes like living things. I got the heater lit, and the small flame seemed to push back the darkness a little. I added paper, making the flame grow bigger and brighter. "Stay in the light," I said. Through the doorway we could see ice crystals forming on the walls of the hallway, growing inward until the passage was nearly blocked. Behind the ice, something moved. A shadow, darker than the darkness. "We need more heat," I said, looking around desperately. Patterson's eyes lit up. "The samples, my equipment." He rushed to his makeshift lab area and returned with a small blowtorch he used for his ice studies. The blue flame roared to life, much hotter than our little fire. Just in time, the ice in the hallway shattered, and through the opening came the skinwalker. In the light of our flames, its body looked more solid than before, but still wrong, like a human form carved from ice by someone who'd only heard about what people look like. Patterson pointed the blowtorch at it, and the creature hissed, a sound like wind through broken glass. It retreated a few steps, keeping just beyond the reach of the flame's heat. "It doesn't like heat," I said. "We need to keep the fire between us and it." For hours, we maintained our small circle of warmth while the creature paced around us, looking for a way in. Sometimes it would dissolve into swirling snow, only to reform elsewhere in the room. Each time, our flames kept it at bay. As night fell outside, the storm grew worse. The windows rattled with the force of the wind, and snow piled up against the walls of the station. Through gaps in the snow, I could see other shapes moving out there, more ice copies, watching, waiting. "We can't keep this up forever," Patterson said. The blowtorch was running low on fuel, and our pile of burnable items was shrinking. "When the torch dies, we run for the garage," I said. "There's another snowmobile there. Maybe we can outrun it." Patterson nodded, but he seemed distracted, constantly looking at the creature with a strange mix of fear and fascination. "Did you see its eyes?" he whispered. "There's intelligence there, ancient intelligence." "Don't look at it too long," I warned. "That's how it gets to you," but he wasn't listening anymore. "Think about what it must know, Abby. Thousands of years of history preserved in living ice." The way he said it sent chills down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. "Patterson," I said firmly, "stay with me." He blinked, coming back to himself. "Sorry, it's just... I can hear it." "Hear what?" "Whispering. Can't you hear it?" I couldn't hear anything except the howling wind and crackling ice, but the look in his eyes scared me more than the creature itself. The blowtorch sputtered, the flame shrinking. "We need to go," I said, "now, before it dies completely." Patterson nodded, but as we gathered our things, he suddenly stopped. "The journal said 7 victims, right? To complete its cycle?" "Yes," I said, not liking where this was going. "The 3 climbers in the ice, that's 3. He counted on his fingers. "You and me would make 5. It needs 2 more. All the more reason to get out of here." He looked at me, his eyes too bright in the fading light. "What if we could communicate with it, learn from it? What if we could control it?" "That thing can't be controlled," I said. "And we're not staying to find out." The blowtorch gave one final sputter and died. In the dim light of our small fire, the skinwalker moved closer, its body reforming more solidly with each passing second. "Now!" I shouted, grabbing Patterson's arm. We ran for the garage door, the cold air burning in our lungs. We made it to the garage, but Patterson stumbled at the last moment. I turned back to see the skinwalker right behind him, its long ice fingers reaching for his neck. "No!" I screamed, swinging my emergency lantern at the creature. The glass broke against its body, spilling kerosene that immediately caught fire. The skinwalker shrieked, a high, inhuman sound that made my ears ring. It backed away, its body melting and reforming in chaotic patterns. Patterson lay on the floor, gasping. Where the creature had touched him, his skin was blue with frostbite. "Can you move?" I asked, helping him up. He nodded weakly. I got him onto the snowmobile and fired it up. The garage door was frozen shut, but I gunned the engine and crashed. Through it, out into the blinding storm. The world was white chaos. I could barely see 10 feet ahead as I drove, following my instincts more than my eyes. Patterson clung to me, his body getting colder by the minute. "I can hear it in my head," he shouted over the engine and wind. "It's so old, Abby, so old and so hungry." I drove faster, pushing the machine to its limits. Behind us, through the swirling snow, I caught glimpses of the skinwalker following, not running, but flowing across the surface like liquid ice, gaining on us with every second. We needed shelter, somewhere defensible. Thunder Basin had the old Forest Service cabin. It wasn't much, but it had a wood stove. Heat. I changed direction, heading for the cabin. Patterson's grip on me was weakening. "Stay with me," I shouted. "We're almost there." His voice came faintly, in my ear. It's beautiful, you know. The things it's seen, the things it knows. The trees of Thunder Basin appeared ahead, and I drove straight for them. The snowmobile crashed through the underbrush, branches whipping at us as we passed. The cabin appeared, a dark shape against the white landscape. I skidded to a stop and helped Patterson inside. His skin was ice cold, his eyes unfocused. I got him to the small cot while I quickly started a fire in the wood stove. Soon, blessed heat filled the one-room cabin. "You're going to be okay," I told him, rubbing his hands to get the blood flowing again. He smiled weakly. Too late for that. He pulled down the collar of his shirt. Blue veins spread across his chest, from where the skinwalker had touched him. But they weren't normal veins. They were filled with something that glittered like ice crystals. "It's inside me," he whispered. "I can feel it growing." Outside, the storm suddenly stopped. Not gradually, but all at once, like someone had flipped a switch. The silence was more terrifying than the howling wind had been. Through the cabin's small window, I saw them, dozens of ice copies surrounding us. Some looked like me, some like Patterson, others like people I didn't recognize, all standing perfectly still, watching, waiting. Patterson's breathing grew shallower as the blue ice veins spread across his chest. His skin was so cold it burned. "To touch. You need to leave me," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Get help." We both knew there was no help to get. Not with those things surrounding us. Not with the storm that could start again any moment. I stoked the fire higher, trying to keep the cabin as warm as possible. "I'm not leaving you." He grabbed my hand suddenly, his grip surprisingly strong. "Listen to me." I found something else. In the journal before it disappeared, there were cave paintings. The locals knew about this thing for centuries. "What did they say?" I asked. "It hibernates," he said, each word an effort now. "It wakes up, takes 7 victims, then goes back. To sleep for decades or centuries. 7 victims," I repeated. "The 3 climbers in the ice, that's 3. You, that's 4. "It needs 3 more, he whispered. Then his eyes widened. "No, wait. There were others. Before we found it." My blood went cold. "What do you mean?" In the journal, it mentioned other disappearances this season. A park visitor last month, 2 local guides who went missing. I did the math quickly. That's 6. It needs 1 more. Patterson nodded weakly. The 7th victim completes the cycle. Then it goes back to sleep. Outside, the ice copies hadn't moved. They just stood there, watching like they had all the time in the world. I checked my watch. 6 hours until sunrise. We just needed to hold out until then. Maybe in daylight. But even as I thought it, I knew the light wouldn't save us. This thing didn't fear the sun. It only feared heat. Heat. That gave me an idea. "Patterson," I said, "do you still have those thermal charges in your pack? The ones for your ice samples?" He nodded weakly. 3 of them. Why? "I'm going to end this." I explained my plan quickly. The thermal charges were designed to melt ice instantly for quick sample collection. They burned at over 1,000 degrees, hot enough to melt even the thickest ice. If this thing is made of ice, those charges might hurt it, maybe even destroy it. "You'd have to get close," Patterson said. "Too close." I knew he was right, but I also knew we were out of options. "There's something else," I said, remembering. Something I'd noticed. At the cave, it couldn't cross the small stream of meltwater. I think it can't cross running water unless it's frozen. Patterson's eyes fluttered closed, then opened with effort. "The ravine," he whispered, "west of here. There's a waterfall that never freezes completely." I knew the one he meant. A narrow ravine with a 50-foot drop and a waterfall that ran year-round, fed by underground hot springs. "If I can lure it there..." "It's suicide," Patterson said. Maybe it was, but the alternative was waiting here to die. I gathered what I needed: the thermal charges, flares, my last bottle of kerosene. As I prepared, Patterson's breathing grew more labored. "Abby," he said suddenly, his voice clearer than it had been for hours. "Look at me." I turned. His eyes were different now. The pupils expanded until they were mostly black, with just a thin ring of blue around them. "It's not just taking my body," he said. "It's taking my mind. I can see what it sees now, thousands of years of memories frozen in time." A tear rolled down his cheek and froze before it reached his jaw. "It's so beautiful and so terrible," he whispered. "It was here before us. It'll be here after we're gone. Fight it," I told him. "Stay with me." But I was losing him. The ice veins had reached his neck now, spreading toward his face. "7 victims," he said again. "Then it sleeps. That's the cycle." I squeezed his hand one last time, then prepared to leave. The plan was simple. Lure the creature to the ravine, get it to follow me onto the narrow ice bridge over the water, then use the thermal charges to melt the ice beneath it, sending it into the unfrozen water below. "I'll be back," I promised, knowing it was probably a lie. Patterson grabbed my arm. For a moment his eyes cleared. "The jade," he said. "Your grandmother's charm. It works. I can see it now. The creature avoids it. The locals use jade to mark safe places, places it wouldn't go." I touched the small jade figurine in my pocket. All these years I'd thought it was just superstition. "Good luck," Patterson whispered. Then his eyes went distant again, looking at something I couldn't see. I slipped out the back window of the cabin, moving as quietly as possible through the deep snow. The ice copies stood perfectly still, their faces turned toward the cabin door. They hadn't seen me yet. I circled around, keeping to the shadows of the trees. The ravine was about half a mile west. Not far, but every step would be through knee-deep snow, with those things potentially right behind me. I'd gone about 100 yards when I heard it, the sound of ice breaking. I looked back to see the cabin windows shattering as ice spread from inside, covering the small building like a living thing. Patterson was gone. The thought hit me like a physical blow, but I couldn't stop moving. I picked up my pace, no longer caring about stealth. Behind me, the ice copies had noticed. They were turning, starting to follow. The ravine appeared ahead, a dark slice in the white landscape. The narrow ice bridge stretched across it, the sound of rushing water coming from far below. I stepped onto the bridge, testing its strength. Solid enough to hold me, but not much more. Then I turned to face what was coming. They emerged from the trees, dozens of ice copies, all moving with the same smooth, gliding motion, and behind them, taller than the rest, came the skinwalker itself. No longer bothering to hide, it moved with terrible purpose, its long arms swinging at its sides, its hollow eyes fixed on me. I backed up onto the middle of the bridge, the thermal charges ready in my hand. This would be close. Too close. The creature paused at the edge of the ravine, as if sensing a trap. Then it moved forward, stepping onto the ice bridge. The structure groaned under its weight. "Come on," I whispered. Just a little closer. It took another step, and another. Its face was just a few feet from mine now, those empty eyes staring into me. Then it spoke. Not with one voice, but many. Patterson's voice was in there, along with others I didn't recognize. "The 7th, it said. "The final one." "That's right," I said, my fingers on the thermal charge's trigger. "Come and get me." It reached for me with those long ice fingers. I waited until the last possible second, then threw the first charge down at the bridge beneath our feet. The sheer effect was instant. The charge exploded in a blast of intense heat, melting a hole straight through the ice. The bridge began to crack, but I'd underestimated how fast the creature could move. As the ice gave way beneath us, one of those long arms shot out, grabbing my left arm in a grip so cold it felt like fire. We fell together toward the rushing water below. In desperation, I pressed the second thermal charge against the creature's arm where it held me. Another explosion of heat. The creature shrieked that glass-breaking cry as its arm melted away. I was free, but still falling. I hit the freezing water hard, the cold knocking the breath from my lungs. The current pulled me downstream, away from where the creature had fallen. Through water-blurred eyes, I saw it thrashing at the edge of the pool, unable or unwilling to enter the flowing water. Its body was breaking apart, the heat and water dissolving its icy form, but it wasn't dying, it was changing, becoming like the swirling snow again, rising up from the water's edge into the air. With numb fingers, I pulled out my last thermal, charge, and my final flare. This was my only chance. The creature swirled above me, reforming, reaching down with new arms made of ice and snow. I struck the flare against the rock wall, igniting it. The bright phosphorus flame cut through the darkness. I touched it to the thermal charge, then threw it directly into the swirling center of the creature. The explosion was blinding, a miniature sun in the darkness of the ravine. The creature's scream was like nothing I'd ever heard before. The sound of ice age winds, of ancient glaciers carving, of cold so intense it burns. When my vision cleared, there was nothing left but slowly falling snow, drifting down like ash from a fire. I dragged myself from the water, my left hand completely numb from where the creature had grabbed me. Already, the flesh was turning black with frostbite. The hike back to the ranger station took hours. By the time I arrived, dawn was breaking over the mountains. The storm had passed, leaving behind a pristine landscape of untouched snow. There was no sign of Patterson, the cabin, or the ice copies. It was as if they had never existed. Over the following days, search teams found the bodies of the 3 missing climbers in ordinary avalanche debris. No ice cave, no perfect preservation. Patterson was listed as missing, presumed dead in the storm. No one believed my story. Why would they? I barely believed it myself. The doctors couldn't save my left hand. The frostbite was too severe. But sometimes I think losing my hand was the price I paid for my life. The creature marked me but didn't take me. I left Denali after that. Couldn't bear to see the darkness on the mountain anymore. Years later, I read about climate scientists discovering unusual cold spots in glaciers worldwide, places where the ice wasn't melting despite global warming. The article listed the locations: Denali, the Alps, the Himalayas. 7 spots, 7 victims. The skinwalker didn't die that night. It just went back to sleep, scattered across the world's high places, waiting for the next time it would wake. And sometimes, on the coldest nights, I swear I can hear it breathing in the wind, whispering from the frozen places of the world, waiting. I still see it sometimes when I close my eyes at night. That thing, not quite dog, not quite man, standing between the cypress trees, watching me with eyes that seem to swallow light instead of reflect it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Nathan De La Cruz, and I've been a park ranger at Everglades National Park for over 20 years now. Most folks who visit see only the beauty, the sunrise painting the sawgrass gold, birds taking flight over still waters, the gentle sway of Spanish moss in the breeze. But I've seen the other side of this place, the side that doesn't make it onto the postcards. It started 3 months ago on a Tuesday morning in April. The air was cool, a rare break from the Florida heat that would come roaring back by noon. I was out on my airboat early, skimming across water that looked like glass, watching egrets pick their way along the shoreline. My face, marked with patches of white vitiligo against my weathered tan skin, was feeling the first warmth of sun. That's when I noticed something odd. "What the hell?" I muttered, cutting the airboat engine. The water depth had changed overnight. Yesterday I could see the bottom clearly, maybe 2 feet deep. Today, in the exact same spot, my depth finder showed over 12 feet. That's not how water works. Not in the Everglades. Not anywhere. I dipped my hand in, feeling the familiar coolness, but something was off. I'd spent enough time out here to know the water by feel. This was different, slightly thicker, with a hint of salt that had no business being in this freshwater section. As I lifted my hand, the droplets did something that still haunts me. They hung in the air for a split second too long. Some even drifted upward before falling. Just a tiny movement, something most people would miss or think was a trick of the light. But I've spent my life watching this ecosystem. I notice things. I pulled out my worn leather journal and started sketching what I'd seen, making notes of the coordinates, the time, the conditions. 20 years ago, notes like these had ended my career as a respected cryptozoologist. Turned me into a laughingstock when I presented evidence of unknown predators in these wetlands. Now I just kept them for myself. "Nathan, you reading me?" My radio crackled to life. "Go ahead," I answered, recognizing my boss's voice. "We've got a new graduate student arriving today, invasive species research. I'm pairing her with you." I sighed. The last thing I needed was some bright-eyed kid following me around, asking questions. "Copy that," I replied, already knowing how this would go. They'd see my journals, hear me talking to myself in 3 languages, notice how I watch the shadows too carefully, and soon they'd be requesting a different ranger. By the time I made it back to the station, the sun was high and hot. The new researcher was waiting on the dock, Marisa Ortiz, according to her name tag. She looked about 25, with practical clothes, and a serious expression that softened when she smiled and extended her hand. "Ranger De La Cruz, I've read your early papers on ecosystem interconnectivity. Your work is why I wanted to study, here specifically. That caught me off guard. Most people either didn't know about my academic past or politely avoided mentioning it. "Just call me Nathan," I said, shaking her hand. "Those papers are from another lifetime." "Well, they're still relevant," she said, hauling her equipment bag. "Especially with what I've been recording lately." She pulled out her phone and played an audio file. At first it sounded like normal underwater noises, the gentle pulse of water, distant boat engines. Then cutting through it all, a sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. It wasn't a gator, wasn't a bird or mammal. It was rhythmic, almost like speech, but nothing human. The closest thing I could compare it to was someone tapping complex patterns on metal pipes, but even that wasn't right. "Where did you record this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Blackwater Hammock 3 nights ago." I felt my blood run cold. Blackwater Hammock was where I'd seen things 20 years ago, things that ended my first career, things no one believed. "And that's not all," she continued, oblivious to my reaction. "The water there is behaving strangely. Salinity changes that follow the moon phases, temperature differences that don't make sense." She was describing exactly what I'd seen that morning, exactly what I'd been documenting in my private journals for years, exactly what no one else had ever noticed, or at least admitted noticing. "Tomorrow," I said, making a decision I knew might be dangerous, "I'm taking you to see something I've never shown anyone else." That night I couldn't sleep. I stood at my cabin window looking out at the vast darkness of the Everglades. For a second, I thought I saw something moving between the trees, walking upright like a man, but shaped wrong, too tall, too thin. Then it was gone, and I was left wondering if my eyes were playing tricks. But deep down, I knew better. The things I'd seen all those years ago were coming back. Or maybe they'd never left. And now, I wasn't the only one noticing. Morning came with fog so thick I could barely see 10 feet ahead. Marisa was already waiting at the dock when I arrived, her recording equipment packed and ready. "Sleep well?" I asked, knowing the answer from the dark circles under her eyes. "Not really," she admitted. "I kept hearing things outside my cabin. Probably just animals, right?" I nodded, not wanting to tell her that the wildlife usually avoids the ranger cabins. "Probably raccoons," I lied. "They get bold sometimes." We loaded up the airboat and headed out into the misty channels. The normal morning sounds were missing. No birds calling, no splash of fish. Just the hum of our engine cutting through heavy. Silence. "It's so quiet," Marisa whispered, even though we were alone. "Animals know things we don't," I said simply. "They sense when something's not right." I cut the engine as we approached the spot from yesterday. The water was even deeper now, my depth finder showing 15 feet where it had been 12 just yesterday. I pulled out a testing kit and took a sample. The salinity is way up, I told her after running a quick test. Almost like seawater, but we're 20 miles from the coast. Marissa frowned. That's impossible. That's the Everglades for you, I said. Impossible things happen here all the time. Watch this. I scooped up some water in my palm and held it up. Just like yesterday, the droplets hung in the air longer than they should, some even drifting upward before falling. Marissa's eyes widened. That's not normal. No, it's not, and it's happening in patterns. I pulled out my journal and showed her my notes, maps marking where I'd found these strange spots over the past few years. You see, they form perfect circles with Blackwater Hammock at the center. She studied my meticulous drawings and notes. This isn't just random. These are like ripples spreading outward. Exactly. And they follow the moon cycles. Tomorrow night is the new moon, and these spots always get worse then. As if on cue, a splash broke the silence. We both turned to see ripples spreading in the water about 30 feet away. Nothing unusual about that in a swamp full of life, except for one thing. The ripples were moving in the wrong direction, flowing toward the center instead of outward. "Did you see that?" Marissa whispered. I nodded, slowly reaching for the binoculars hanging around my neck. Through the fog, I could just make out something dark moving beneath the surface. Too big for a gator, too fast for a manatee. It moved with purpose, circling our boat just out of clear sight. "We should go," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Now!" As I started the engine, Marissa pointed to something on a cypress tree ahead of us. "Wait, what's that?" On the trunk, about 6 feet up, was a marking I recognized immediately. A Seminole warning symbol, carved decades ago but still clear. A circle with jagged lines through it. I'd seen these before, always near the anomalies. "It means thin place," I translated. "Where the boundary between worlds isn't as strong." The Seminole knew to avoid these spots during certain moon phases. "You believe that?" she asked, not sounding skeptical, more curious. "After 20 years out here, I believe what I see. And I've seen plenty that science can't explain." We spent the rest of the day setting up Marissa's equipment, underwater microphones, temperature sensors, motion-triggered cameras. The whole time, I felt like we were being watched, not by anything human. The feeling was too hungry. As the sun started to set, casting long shadows through the cypress trees, Marissa's phone pinged with an alert from one of her motion sensors. "Something big just passed camera 3, she said, pulling up the footage. The image made my heart stop. It showed a normal deer drinking at the water's edge, but its reflection was wrong. Instead of matching the deer, it showed a distorted, elongated shape with too many limbs, standing upright, where the deer's four-legged reflection should be. The deer in the image seemed completely unaware. "Could be a camera glitch," Marissa suggested, not sounding convinced. I was about to answer when we heard it, a long, low howl that was nothing like a wolf or coyote. It started on a deep note, then climbed to something almost like words, almost like it was calling someone by name. My name. The birds that had finally returned during the day all took flight at once, a dark cloud against the dimming sky. "Time to go," I said, starting the boat. "We'll come back tomorrow, but night falls fast here, and we don't want to be out after dark. Not tonight." On the way back, I noticed Marissa looking over her shoulder every few minutes. She felt it too, that crawling sense that something was pacing us just out of sight, matching our speed, waiting for us to stop. When we reached the station, the other rangers were gathered in the common room, looking at a map. "Problem?" I asked. "Tourist group missing," said Rodriguez, the senior ranger. "Family of 4. Their cars still at the east entrance parking lot, but they never came back from their hike. Search teams are heading out at first light. I glanced at Marissa, seeing my own concern reflected in her eyes. Where were they headed? I asked already. Knowing the answer, Rodriguez pointed to the map. They told the entrance guide they wanted to see Blackwater Hammock, said they heard it was beautiful this time of year. A cold weight settled in my stomach. No one recommends Blackwater Hammock. Especially not now, with the new moon coming tomorrow night. Someone had wanted them to go there, or something had. Sleep didn't come easy that night. Rain tapped against my cabin window like impatient fingers, and thunder rolled in the distance. I lay awake, thinking about those missing tourists and what might have happened to them. At first, I met Marissa outside the ranger station. Dark clouds still hung low, making the morning feel like dusk. 6 rangers were gearing up for the search, checking radios and packing emergency supplies. "I want to join the search," Marissa said. As I approached, Rodriguez overheard her. "No civilians on search teams. Park policy." "She's coming with me," I said firmly. "Her equipment might help us find them." Rodriguez knew better than to argue. In 20 years, I'd earned the right to bend some rules. He just nodded and went. "Back to organizing the other teams. We're taking the south approach to Blackwater Hammock," I told Marissa as we loaded the boat. "The other teams are coming in from the east and west. If those tourists are still out there, we'll find them." But a voice in the back of my mind whispered, "Unless they don't want to be found." The rain had stopped, but the air felt heavy with moisture as we made our way through narrow channels. Everything looked different in the grey light, more primeval, like we'd slipped back in time to when these swamps were untouched by humans. "I've been thinking about those symbols on the trees," Marissa said, breaking the silence. "I looked them up last night. They appear in other places too, parts of Ireland, Japan, certain mountains in Peru, always with the same warning about thin places." I nodded. The Seminole believe there are spots where our world and other worlds brush up against each other, like 2 soap bubbles touching. Usually nothing can pass through, but during certain times, like new moons, she interrupted. Exactly, during those times the boundary gets weaker. Things can slip through, in both directions. We fell silent as we approached Blackwater Hammock. The water here was even stranger than before, perfectly still despite the breeze, black as ink, but clear enough to see through. Looking down was like peering into a starless sky. I cut the engine and let us drift the last few yards. The silence was complete. No insects, no birds, nothing but the gentle bump of our boat against fallen cypress knees. "Their hiking trail should be just ahead," I said softly. We secured the boat and started following the narrow dirt path that wound through the hammock. Normally, these raised areas of dry land would be teeming with life. Snakes sunning themselves, birds calling from the branches, insects buzzing everywhere. Today there was nothing. About a half-mile in, Marissa stopped suddenly. "Look at these tracks." Footprints marked the muddy trail. 4 sets, likely the missing family. But there was something wrong with them. The prints started normally, then began to get lighter with each step, as if the people were gradually losing weight. The final prints were barely visible at all, just the faintest impression in the mud. It's like they were fading away as they walked, Marissa whispered. "I'd seen this once before, 20 years ago. I never found those hikers either. A few yards ahead, we found their backpack. Inside was a camera, still working. I switched it on and flipped through the photos. Most were normal tourist shots, smiling family poses against the backdrop of trees and water. Then the images changed. The last dozen photos showed the family standing together, but with each picture they became more transparent. In the final image, you could see right through them, their outlines just barely visible against the trees behind. And standing beside them, just at the edge of the frame, was a dark shape. Too tall to be human, too thin, with a head that wasn't. Quite right, more like a dog's, but elongated. I quickly shut off the camera, but not before Marissa had seen it too. "What was that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Before I could answer, my radio crackled to life. "De la Cruz, we found something at the west entrance to the hammock." Rodriguez's voice came through, breaking up with static. "Looks like camera equipment, strange markings. You need to see this." "Copy that," I replied. "We're on our way." As we turned to head back to the boat, something caught my eye, a patch of vegetation about 20 feet off the trail. Every plant, in a perfect circle maybe 10 feet across, was dead. Not just dead, they looked like they'd been dead for years, reduced to grey ash that still somehow held the shape of leaves and stems. I took a step toward it, but Marissa grabbed my arm. "Don't," she said. "Look up, above the dead circle, hanging. From the branches were dozens of small objects catching the dim light." I took out my binoculars for a closer look and felt my blood turn cold. Watches, dozens of wristwatches hanging by their bands. Some looked brand new, others ancient, their faces cracked and hands frozen at different times. "Time doesn't work right here," I said quietly. "That's why I never wear a watch in the Everglades." As we made our way back to the boat, I felt that familiar prickle on the back of my neck, the feeling of being watched. I turned quickly, scanning the trees. For just a second, I thought I saw it. A tall, thin shape standing between two cypress trees. Not quite solid, more like a darker patch of shadow, but it had eyes. Yellow eyes that didn't reflect light, but seemed to swallow it. Then it was gone, melting into the deeper shadows as a cloud passed over the sun. "Did you see that?" I asked Marissa. She nodded slowly, her face pale. "What is it?" "The locals have many names for it," I said as we hurried to the boat. "The Seminole call it the Shadow Walker. Older reports call it the Dogman. But names don't matter much. What matters is that it's real, and it's hunting." "Hunting what?" she asked. I started the boat engine before answering. "Us. It's always been. Hunting us." The trip to the west entrance took longer than it should have. Twice we had to backtrack when familiar channels suddenly ended in walls of dense reeds that I knew hadn't been there yesterday. The Everglades was changing around us, like a puzzle being rearranged by unseen hands. "The GPS isn't working," Marissa said, tapping her phone screen. "It says we're in the Gulf of Mexico." "Put it away," I told her. "Technology gets confused in these places. We need to use our eyes and ears." When we finally reached the west entrance, we found Rodriguez and two other rangers standing around something on the ground. Their faces were grim. "Glad you made it," Rodriguez said, looking relieved to see us. "We've been trying to radio you for an hour." "Radio's been working fine," I said, showing him my unit. "We've been answering your calls." He shook his head. "We haven't heard anything from you since you headed out this morning." A chill ran down my spine. Someone, or something, had been answering their calls, pretending to be me. "What did you find?" I asked, changing the subject. Rodriguez led us to what they'd been examining. On the ground was a small campsite, not from our missing tourists, but older. A tattered tent, a rusty camp stove, and a camera on a tripod, all covered in a layer of dust and leaves like they'd been there for months. "Check the camera," Rodriguez said. The camera was an old model, the kind that used film. Its tripod was pointed at a clearing beyond the campsite. I looked through the viewfinder and saw handmade markers placed in a large circle, each one bearing strange symbols. "There's a journal too," one of the other rangers said, handing me a water-damaged notebook. The pages were filled with neat handwriting and detailed sketches. As I flipped through it, my heart began to race. The writer had been tracking the same phenomena I had, the water anomalies, the dead zones, the strange animal behavior. But they'd gone further, connecting it to historical disappearances dating back to the earliest Spanish explorations of Florida. "Look at this," I said, showing a page to Marissa. "Disappearances in 1578, 1641, 1723, 1851, 1921, and 1997. All during new moons, all in this same area. That's every 76 years, she said quickly, like clockwork. And tonight's the first new moon of 2073, I added softly. Rodriguez looked uncomfortable. You two sound crazy, you know that. Maybe, I admitted, but that doesn't make us wrong. I flipped to the final pages of the journal. The writing became more frantic, the neat handwriting deteriorating into scrawls. The last entry simply read, "It's not just watching anymore, it's learning. God help us if it gets out." The date on that entry was June 12, 1997, exactly 76 years after the previous disappearances. "We need to warn the other search teams," I said. "Get everyone out of the park before nightfall." Rodriguez looked like he wanted to argue, but thought better of it. "I'll radio it in," he said, moving away from us. While he made the call, Marisa and I examined the circle of markers more closely. Each one was made from cypress wood, carved with symbols similar to the ones on the trees, but more complex. "These form a boundary," Marisa said, recognizing the pattern. "Like the ones mentioned in my research, designs meant to contain supernatural entities. But it's broken now," I pointed out. Several markers had fallen or rotted away, leaving gaps in the circle. As we studied the site, the sky grew darker. The air became still, pressing against us like a physical weight. Birds began to fly overhead in huge flocks, all moving away from Blackwater Hammock. "They're leaving," I said quietly. "Smart." Rodriguez returned, looking worried. "Can't reach anyone on the radio, just static and weird noises." "What kind of noises?" Marisa asked. "Like breathing. And sometimes what sounds like words, but not in any language I know." The sun was getting low now, turning the clouds fiery orange and red. We had maybe an hour of daylight left. "We need to leave," I said firmly. "Now." As we headed back to our boats, a scream cut through the air, distant but clear. Human, filled with terror, coming from the direction of Blackwater Hammock. "That's Team 3's area," Rodriguez said, already moving in that direction. "Wait," I called after him. "We need to stay together." But he and the other rangers were already running toward the sound. I looked at Marisa, seeing my own fear reflected in her eyes. "We can't leave them," she said. I knew she was right. "Stay close to me," I said, grabbing my pack. "And whatever happens, don't look it directly in the eyes." We hurried after the others, following a narrow trail through increasingly dense vegetation. The screaming had stopped, which somehow made it worse. We found Rodriguez's radio first, lying on the trail, then one of the other rangers' hats, then footprints, running, chaotic, veering off the path. As the last light faded from the sky, we reached a small clearing and stopped dead in our tracks. The other rangers were there, standing perfectly still, facing away from us. They didn't move when I called their names, didn't react when we approached. When I touched Rodriguez's shoulder, he turned slowly. His eyes were open but empty, not unconscious, but not really there either, like something else was looking through them. "Nathan," he said, but the voice wasn't his. It was deeper, hollow, like it was coming from the bottom of a well. "We've been waiting for you." The other rangers turned too, all with the same empty eyes. "Run," I whispered to Marisa. "Back to the boat. Now." We backed away slowly. As we did, I saw something moving in the deepening shadows behind the rangers, something tall and thin that seemed to bend in ways a human body couldn't. And then we were running, crashing through the underbrush, the path back to the boat suddenly, unfamiliar and wrong. Behind us came sounds, not footsteps, but a slithering, rustling noise, keeping pace effortlessly. Just as we reached the water's edge, Marisa's foot caught on a root, and she fell hard. I turned to help her up and saw it. Just. For a second in the fading light, the dogman stood at the edge of the trees, its form shifting between shadow and substance. It had the rough shape of a man, but was too tall, too thin, with limbs that bent at odd angles. Its head was long, canine, with yellow eyes that seemed to pull at my mind. It didn't move to attack, it just watched, head tilted slightly as if curious. "Don't look at it," I said, pulling Marissa up and pushing her toward the boat. As we sped away, I glanced back once. The creature was gone, but Rodriguez and the other rangers stood at the water's edge, watching us go with those same empty eyes. And as the darkness closed in completely, I knew with terrible certainty that we weren't escaping. We were being allowed to leave. The ranger station was eerily quiet when we returned. The lights were on, but no one was around. No night staff, no search coordinators, no one. "Where is everyone?" Marissa asked, her voice echoing in the empty building. I checked the duty roster on the wall. There should be at least 3 people here. We checked the radio room next. The main set was on, but producing only static with occasional sounds that might have been words buried in the noise. The logbook showed that no one had signed in or out since early afternoon. "It's isolating us," I said, staring out the window at the darkness beyond, clearing the playing field. Marissa was flipping through the old journal we'd found, studying the pages intently. "Nathan, look at this," she said, pointing to a sketch. "These symbols, they're the same ones we saw on the cypress trees, but arranged in a specific pattern." The drawing showed a circle of symbols with notes describing materials: iron, salt, native cypress wood. At the bottom of the page, a note read, "Boundary trap contains entity temporarily during transit phase. Must maintain unbroken circle." "Transit phase?" I asked. "I think," Marissa said slowly, "it means when it's moving between wherever it comes from and our world. During the new moon." I looked at my watch, old habit, even though I knew better than to trust time near these phenomena. It was just after 9 p.m. The new moon would reach its peak around midnight. "We need to recreate this," I said, pointing to the symbol circle. "It might be our only chance to stop whatever's happening." "Stop it how?" Marissa asked. I didn't have an answer for that yet. "One step at a time. First, we contain it." We gathered supplies from around the station: salt from the kitchen, iron nails from the maintenance shed, sections of cypress branch I'd collected years ago for just such a purpose, though I'd never admitted that to myself. As we worked, the temperature in the room began to drop. I could see my breath fogging in the air, even though the Florida night outside was warm and humid. "It knows," Marissa whispered. The lights flickered, then went out completely, leaving us in darkness broken only by our flashlights. Outside, a low howl rose from the direction of Blackwater Hammock. Not quite animal, not quite human. "We need to hurry," I said, gathering our supplies into a bag. We decided to make our stand at the dock, open space, multiple escape routes, and close. To water, which the journal suggested could disrupt the entity's ability to fully materialize. As we stepped outside, the night felt wrong. The stars were too bright, arranged in patterns I didn't recognize despite my decades studying the night sky. The moon, though new and invisible, somehow left a dark outline against the stars, like a hole in the fabric of the night. At the dock, we worked quickly by flashlight, laying out our circle using the journal's diagram as a guide. Salt to bind, iron to repel, cypress wood carved with the ancient symbols to contain. "Will this really work?" Marissa asked as we placed the last marker. "I don't know," I admitted, "but the Seminole have been dealing with this thing for centuries. I trust their knowledge more than anything science has offered." Just as we finished, my radio crackled to life. Through bursts of static came a voice, Rodriguez, but wrong somehow, flatter. "Nathan," the voice said, "we're coming back. We found them. We found everyone." I didn't respond. The real Rodriguez wouldn't be using a radio frequency that reached this far from Blackwater Hammock. "They're coming," I said to Marissa. "Get inside the circle." We stood back to back in the center of our makeshift boundary, watching the darkness surrounding the pool of light cast by our flashlights. The air grew colder, heavy with moisture that wasn't quite rain. More like the air itself was condensing around us. Shapes moved at the edge of the light, human silhouettes walking with stiff, unnatural movements. As they came closer, I recognized them, Rodriguez and the other rangers, the missing family, and others I didn't know, people with old-fashioned clothes, perhaps victims from previous cycles. They stopped just short of our circle, forming a ring around us. Their eyes reflected our flashlight beams like animals' eyes, but wrong. The light seemed to curve inward, spiraling into their pupils instead of bouncing back. "Nathan," they said in unison, their voices overlapping into a single droning sound. "You've been looking for us for so long, and now we're here." "That's not them," I said to Marisa, who was trembling beside me. "It's using them, their bodies or their memories." The air between us and the circle of people began to warp and twist. Shadows stretched and merged, taking on a form that towered over the human figures. The dogman, more solid than I'd seen it before, yellow eyes fixed on me with awful intelligence. "You know me," it said, the sound coming not from its mouth-like opening, but from the air all around us. "You've always known me. Since you were a child, wandering these waters, I've watched you watching me." A chill ran through me. It was right. I'd seen things in these swamps since I was young. Glimpses, reflections, movements that couldn't be explained. That's what had driven me to become a cryptozoologist, then a ranger. I'd been looking for it my entire life. "What do you want?" I asked, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. "To cross over," it said simply, "to bring my world to yours. The boundaries weaken every 76 years. But I need anchors, minds that can see me, that believe in me." "Witnesses," Marisa whispered. "It needs people to believe in it, to fully manifest." The entity's form rippled like heat waves over hot pavement. "Smart," it said, focusing those terrible eyes on her. "You understand more than most. That's why you'll be perfect." It took a step forward, and I felt our protective circle strain. Against its presence, the salt line began to blacken and smoke where it was closest. "Our barrier's not going to hold it for long," I whispered to Marisa. "I have an idea," she said, her voice barely audible. "The journal mentioned water disrupts its form, and salt water is even more effective." I nodded slightly, understanding her plan. We were standing on a dock with deep water just feet away. If we could lure it in. "You've been trapped between worlds for a long time," I said loudly to the creature. "Is that why you take people? To have bodies in our world?" Its form wavered again, the dog-like head elongating further. "Bodies are limiting. I take minds, memories. Belief is the currency between worlds." While it focused on me, Marisa slowly reached into our supply bag and pulled out a container of salt. "And what happens to those people?" I asked, keeping its attention. "The ones from 1997, 1921, all the others?" "They serve," it said simply. "As your friends serve now, as you will serve soon." The possessed people took a synchronized step forward. Our circle flared with blue light where they approached, holding them back for now. "The moon reaches its darkest point in 7 minutes, Marisa whispered to me, glancing at her phone. "According to the journal, that's when the boundary between worlds will be thinnest." The creature's form grew more solid by the second, details emerging that I didn't want to see. Impossible angles, textures that shifted between fur, scale, and something like oil on water. "Your circle can't hold me, Nathan," it said, my name sounding wrong in its voice. "You made it wrong. You always make it wrong." With horror, I realized what it meant. Every 76 years, someone tried to stop it. Every time, they failed. The abandoned camp we'd found wasn't from 1997. It was from 2073, our year. We were caught in a loop, playing our parts in a cycle that had happened before and would happen again, unless we changed something. "Marisa," I said quietly, When I say now, throw the salt and run for the boat. Don't look back, no matter what you hear." She nodded, her hand tight around the salt container. The entity leaned forward, its form stretching impossibly as it tested. Our barrier. Where it touched the circle's edge, our symbols flared and smoked. "Now!" I shouted. Marisa threw the salt directly at the creature's face. It screamed, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once, and recoiled, its form losing solidity. As Marisa ran for the boat, I broke the circle myself, stepping out and drawing the entity's attention. "You want a witness?" I shouted. "Come and get one!" I turned and ran, not toward the boat, but toward the end of the dock. Behind me, I felt rather than saw it recover and give chase, moving impossibly fast. The possessed people stood frozen, like puppets with cut strings. At the dock's edge, I turned to face it. The entity had almost fully materialized now. A towering form of twisted limbs and hungry eyes, more solid than I'd ever seen it. "You can't escape," it said, closing the distance between us. "I'm not trying to," I replied. As it reached for me, I stepped backward off the dock, falling into the dark water below. And it followed, its momentum carrying it over the edge after me. The moment it hit the water I'd spent the afternoon secretly salting. The creature's scream tore through the night. Its form began to dissolve, yellow eyes widening in what might have been surprise or fear. I felt cold limbs grab me, pulling me down into the darkness. Its voice filled my head, no longer coming from outside, but speaking directly into my mind. "If I cannot cross over," it said, "then you will cross with me." The water around us began to swirl, not like a normal current, but like reality itself was bending. I caught glimpses of impossible landscapes, alien skies, twisted forests, oceans that flowed upward. My lungs burned for air as we sank deeper. The entity's form wrapped around me like living shadows. But then light cut through the darkness, the beam of our boat's spotlight. Marisa had circled back. The creature's grip loosened just enough for me to break free and kick toward the surface. As I gasped for air, Marisa hauled me into the boat. Behind us, the water churned and boiled, yellow eyes glaring up at us from the depths. "Go!" I coughed. "Get us out of here!" As Marisa gunned the engine, I looked back one last time. The possessed people still stood on the dock, watching us with empty eyes. And beneath the water, that terrible form was already beginning to reform, reaching upward. With limbs that stretched like smoke, we hadn't destroyed it. Maybe nothing could. But we'd disrupted its crossing, at least for tonight. As we sped away, I wondered how many others had done the same throughout history, buying the world another 76 years. And I wondered what would happen when no one was left who knew how to fight it. Dawn broke over the Everglades with a gentleness that felt wrong after the horrors of the night. Marisa and I had spent the remaining dark hours on the move, never staying in one place too long, taking turns to sleep in the boat as we drifted through quiet channels. Now, with the first rays of sunlight warming my face, I allowed myself to believe we might have survived. "Do you think it's over?" Marisa asked, her voice rough from exhaustion. I watched an egret land gracefully on a nearby cypress knee, fishing for its breakfast, as if nothing strange had ever happened in these waters. "For now," I said, "the new moon has passed. The boundary between worlds has strengthened again." "But it's still there," she said. It wasn't a question. Yes, waiting for the next cycle, for the next opportunity. We made our way slowly back toward the main park area, both of us jumping at shadows and sudden sounds. The radio remained silent, despite my attempts to contact anyone. When we finally reached the ranger station, we found it busy with normal morning activity, rangers coming and going, tourists getting maps and information. Everyone acted completely normal, as if nothing had happened. Rodriguez was at his desk filling out paperwork. When he saw us, he smiled. "There you are. We were starting to worry. How'd the equipment testing go?" I exchanged a confused look with Marisa. "The equipment testing? Yeah, you two took a boat. Out yesterday to test Ms. Ortiz's recording gear, right? Find anything interesting? A chill ran down my spine. He had no memory of the search, the missing tourists, or anything that had happened at Blackwater Hammock. It was educational, I said carefully. Great. Oh, and Nathan, you got a package. It's on your desk. I walked to my small office, Marissa following close behind. On my desk sat a package wrapped in brown paper with no postage or return address. Just my name written in faded ink. Should you open it? Marissa whispered. My hands trembled slightly as I unwrapped the package. Inside was a leather-bound journal, identical to the one we'd found at the abandoned campsite, but newer. The pages blank, except for the first one. On that page, in my own handwriting, was a message. To whoever finds this in 2149, it returns every 76 years. The pattern holds. Salt water disrupts its form. Iron repels it. Cypress wood carved with the old symbols contains it. The circle must be unbroken. Be ready. Below that were precise drawings of the symbols we'd used in our barrier, along with notes on their proper arrangement. But I didn't write this, I said, showing the page to Marissa. She studied it, her face pale. Not yet, she whispered, but you will. I understood then. The journal we'd found yesterday wasn't from 1997. It was from now, from us, sent back into the cycle somehow. And this blank one would become our record for the next people who would face the entity. Time doesn't work normally around it, I said quietly. The watches hanging from the trees, the way Rodriguez and everyone else have no memory of what happened. It can bend time somehow. Marissa sat heavily in the chair across from my desk. So, what do we do now? We document everything, I said, taking out a pen. Everything we saw, everything we learned, and then we find a way to make sure this journal survives for 76 years. And the others? Rodriguez, the missing tourists, all those people on the dock? I hadn't wanted to think about them. I don't know. Maybe they'll come back to themselves now that the new moon has passed. Or maybe... I couldn't finish the thought. The idea that they might remain empty shells, or worse, that something else might be looking out through their eyes, was too horrible to voice. As if reading my thoughts, Marissa said, "We need to check on them. Over the next few days, we did just that. Rodriguez and the other rangers seemed perfectly normal. No memory of anything unusual, just a strange gap where those days should have been. The tourists who had gone missing were back in their hotel, in Naples, confused about losing a day, but otherwise unharmed. Everything appeared to have reset itself when the new moon passed, and the boundary between worlds strengthened again. But there were signs that not everything had returned to normal. Birds still avoided Blackwater Hammock. Water samples still showed strange salinity patterns. And occasionally, my radio would pick up bursts of static that sounded almost like words. A week after that terrible night, I took Marissa back out to the hammock in daylight. The place looked beautiful, peaceful even, Spanish moss swaying gently. In the breeze, I've been offered a permanent research position, she told me, as we navigated through a narrow channel. The university wants me to stay and continue my work on the park's ecosystem. Are you going to take it? I asked, already knowing the answer. Someone needs to watch this place, she said simply. Someone needs to remember what happened. What will happen again? We fell silent as we approached the spot where we'd found the tourist family's backpack. There was no sign it had ever been there. No circle of dead plants, no hanging watches. Just the natural beauty of the Everglades. But as we were leaving, I noticed something carved into a cypress tree, fresh marks that hadn't been there before. The same symbol we'd seen throughout the park, but with a small addition, a crude stick figure with what might have been a ranger hat. It's learned your shape, Marissa whispered. I touched the carving lightly. It's marking me. For next time. That night, alone in my cabin, I began writing in the journal, documenting everything in detail, drawing diagrams of the barrier circle, mapping where we'd encountered the entity. Future generations would need this knowledge. As I wrote late into the night, I heard a familiar whistling outside my window, a tune I often whistled myself while on patrol. But I wasn't whistling now. I looked up slowly. Through the window, I could see a thick fog had rolled in, unusual for this time of year. And in that fog, barely visible, was a shape. A figure that might have been a man in a ranger hat, standing perfectly still, watching my cabin. I blinked, and it was gone. But the whistling continued for a moment longer before fading into the night. I returned to my writing with renewed urgency. 76 years wasn't so long, really. Not for something that had been waiting for centuries. Not for something that had learned to be patient. In my dreams that night, I walked through an Everglades I didn't recognize. The trees more ancient, the water darker, the sky above filled with stars in patterns I'd never seen. And I wasn't alone. Something walked beside me, wearing my shape like an ill-fitting coat, whistling my tune. 76 years, it seemed to say, though no words were spoken. I can wait. And somewhere in the distance, beyond this strange mirror world, I could hear Marisa calling my name, her voice growing fainter with each step I took deeper into the shadow pines. 3 months later, a hiker found an old journal in a waterproof container wedged into the hollow of a lightning-struck cypress tree in Blackwater Hammock. The journal was delivered to the ranger station, where it was filed away in a cabinet of lost and found items. 76 years would pass before anyone would open it again. 76 years before the boundaries would weaken once more. And in the deepest part of the Everglades, where the water runs black and the cypress trees stand like silent guardians, something waits, patient, watching, learning. Sometimes on particularly foggy mornings, visitors report hearing whistling coming from empty sections of the park. Rangers tell them it's just the wind moving through the cypress knees, but Nathan Dela Cruz would know better. He always did.